You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com. Join in on the conversation. Visit the sidebar at wearelibertarians.com and join our Facebook group, meet other listeners, and get our daily news dump.
The Johnny Rocket Launchpad is Liberty. Each week we strive to bring you the best guests in talk radio. The Johnny Rocket Launchpad delivers weekly interviews of noteworthy politicians, experts, and activists. The Johnny Rocket Launchpad is bringing the party to the Libertarian Party and launching ideas in your direction. Check us out at johnnyrocketlaunchpad.com. You can hear me, Kurt Nelson, and the beautiful Heather Nixon talk about the ideas of liberty. Rock and roll.
Hey guys, this is Roger Paxton, and if you're fed up with the government running every single aspect of your life, but you're not listening to the Lava Flow podcast yet, then what's wrong with you? Check us out at thelavaflow.com, or just go back to sucking up to the government. The Lava Flow podcast, striking the root every single episode.
It's time to shake up your podcast feed, folks, by subscribing to Lions of Liberty, the only libertarian variety show out there. Spend Mondays with me, Mark Claire, as I feature in-depth interviews with great names in the libertarian community and fun roundtable discussions.
Electric Liberty Land with me, Brian McWilliams, every Wednesday, your weekly dose of comedy, culture, and liberty.
And Felony Fridays with me, John Odermatt, where I expose injustice in the broken criminal justice system.
Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and at lionsofliberty.com.
We are supported by listeners like you. Donate per month or make a one-time donation through PayPal or Patreon at wearelibertarians.com. Welcome to We Are Libertarians. I am your host, Chris Spangle. We Are Libertarians brings you all of the irreverence modern politics deserves. Think of us as the love child of National Review and Mad Magazine. We explain to you what the hell is happening in our world today and how we can fix it by thinking differently. Please be sure to rate and review us on iTunes, like us on Facebook, share this episode with friends, and support us through PayPal or Patreon at wearelibertarians.com. We are supported by listeners like you, so $1 per episode by pledging $5 a month helps us grow. We are always taking your questions and comments via email at editor@wearelibertarians.com, and we have a Dear Leader letter that is critical of Dear Leader today. Nathan's going to get it.
Oh, he hates me.
If you are new to the program, we catch up for the first 20 minutes or so, and then a deep dive into analyzing current events and society from a libertarian perspective. This show is for adults by semi-adults, so please be warned, the language is strong and offensive. Joining me, as always, is the reliable co-host, Greg Lenz. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing well, Chris. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Kat is off this week. It is recruitment week. And I was sent a Snapchat of 72 female college students in a dorm room chanting.
Oh, God.
It'd be
we
torture.
are AOPI.
Oh, yeah.
Blood and soil, I thought.
No, sorry.
It was not blood and soil. It was something completely...
The Challenger was fine. She made it back to Ball State. Plenty of time to start school.
Not a scratch on that Challenger. Yeah, Kat, of course, not on the Instagram because, as we mentioned on a previous episode, not aesthetic. Yeah. Could you imagine? I could never be in a sorority.
You know, in Germany, that would land you in jail.
I could be in a sorority, not a fraternity.
Could you?
Well, I'm good with women.
That's true. Oh, right.
I saw where he was going.
Now, Matt Wittlief also joins us. Matt, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing well, thank you.
That mic is a little hot because you talk louder than Kat does. You have her voice is deeper than yours.
I'm sorry, I'll...
Yeah. And then that laugh you hear...
Join AOPI.
So Kat is not leaving us. Kat is just busy with school, and she's going to do her best to come on as often as she can. So please send her encouraging notes as she begins her school year. We all know how difficult school is for Kat.
Communications isn't as easy as it used to be.
It takes her a long time to learn.
You don't just fail TV, without trying.
If you're watching the video on YouTube, we have a very, very attractive blonde in the corner, but she's not going to talk to us because she doesn't want to be on the podcast, but she's reading. That is, I won't say your name because it seems like you don't want your name said, but just our luck that we get a woman on the podcast and she won't talk to us. What's your? Do you want to say your name?
Yeah, sure. Hi.
Oh, I got to turn your mic on. What's your name?
I'm Morgan.
Oh.
Mordan Dean.
Hi, Morgan.
Hi, Morgan.
Hi, Morgan.
Tell us your story.
We're all never Bittner, too. Now, Morgan is the girlfriend of Brett Bittner.
I wouldn't say girlfriend.
Oh, that's right.
I mean,
Abductee.
Now, how long have you been held hostage?
3 months. 3 months.
Very nice.
Since the last Wall Live.
Yeah,
Right.
You
that's
guys
when
brought
her.
us together, actually.
And you said, I want you to meet this liberalitarian. And I just looked at her and was like, you're getting helicoptered.
No libertarians. That's Greg's policy.
Yes.
Now,
All comedies are the same.
I don't know what I was thinking, but I have broken my own rule and invited Bittner back on. Brett Bittner, welcome back.
Hi, Spangle. How are you?
I've been doing pretty well. You look fantastic.
You do.
Thank you.
The number one reason is not the 20-year-old blonde that is sitting over in the corner. It's Bittner, and to look and see how good he looks. You look fantastic.
Thank you.
You got to talk into that mic though.
I'm trying.
All right.
I also want to make sure that I keep eye contact because I don't trust you over there.
You're a gypsy. You're a thieving gypsy. You will never get this.
I went to America with a jar of gypsy tears to protect me from AIDS. If you haven't seen Borat recently, you've got to. It's good.
It's glorious.
It's so good, so good. Bittner, you have conquered diabetes, and it is August as we record this, August 17th at 7:38 p.m. And in October, you were diagnosed with diabetes, and then you did what?
I changed the way that I eat.
Mm-hmm.
That was it.
That's it?
I mean, I took the medicine that the doctor told me to, but mainly I changed the way that I eat to adopt a ketogenic diet. Go ahead. I'm ready. Hit me. Greg?
No, that's
I think
good.
it's awesome.
Yeah,
It's
great.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You keto-costed diabetes.
Yes, exactly.
I will say my number one motivator for working out since January and losing weight and getting myself healthy is to avoid diabetes.
Well, I don't blame you.
Not because I don't want diabetes. That'd be bad. What would be far worse is Keto Bittner coming into my life and trying to train me to beat diabetes. So
Bittner imperialism.
So, Brett, you look fantastic. We're very proud of the weight that you have lost. We are very proud of the changes that you've made in your life.
Very, very good to see you feel happy and look as effervescent as you ever have.
Seems like you'll be
Thank
happier
you.
once
He
you
also stopped hanging out with me, so that might have a little bit to do with his
happiness.
I don't know.
He's less swarthy. I don't know if keto changes your hue, but I feel like we're not quite as ethnically close as we used to be.
Aww.
And then,
Sorry to
listen,
hear that, Greg.
You're going to be so much happier once you stop hanging out with an INTJ. Honestly. Like, she's an INTJ. They're my mortal enemy.
I'm not sure why. INTJs are pretty cool. They make up 2% of the population, actually. Fun fact.
Because that's why. That was the most INTJ shit I've ever heard.
If you have to know what percentage of the population your Myers-Briggs is, I feel like it's not that popular.
It's kind of like libertarianism. In fact, INTJs are a majority of
Are
libertarians.
they predominantly libertarian?
Yeah.
That actually makes quite a bit of sense, really.
The
Very
NT
analytical and logical.
The NT specifically, but INTJs do make up a really large
I would think the I as
percentage.
well.
Yes.
Predominantly.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Lots of basement dwelling.
Welcome to the party.
I don't like it.
Thank you.
You will love all the other women you'll meet.
All four of them.
Yeah.
I'm an ENFJ, and therefore I like people. I just need a lot of time away from them. All right, so
love-hate relationship with other people.
We need to start out this episode by confirming that none of us are racist. Greg, what's your feeling on the Jews?
Jesus was a great man. You know, I've often believed that, like Thomas Jefferson, who wrote a Bible, his own Bible of Jesus, that it is the best moral philosophy one can live.
I love the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Matt?
Big Jew fan.
Jews? Bittner?
Yeah, we're cool.
I have many friends who are Jews.
Yeah. Morgan, do you want to weigh in on the Jews?
I'm pro-Jew.
All right, okay. We're going to go down the... we need to, apparently, in this day and age...
You need to make public declaration. You need to Jew signal. Is really what you need to do.
Now, I love black
Would
people.
that be virtue signaling?
Virtue signaling, yes.
Very good. Now, if you were to choose one race, what would it be? Mine would be black. I would be a black man. Because this is why all these people in Charlottesville are upset, because black men are so cool that they're stealing all of our women.
Yeah, I mean, that's how Hillary Clinton lost in 2008. She lost to the cool black guy. That's what she said.
Exactly. The dorkiest black man, like Harry is the coolest out of all of us because he's
hands
black.
down.
Yeah,
I mean nobody has more street cred on Wall with the LARPers up in New Hampshire. That one of their guys just had a documentary on Vice. Very, very good. Very good.
So big fan of the black people, Matt.
Malaysians.
That's your
Malaysian?
first choice, really?
All right.
I like that. That's the one I've never heard. Is there any reason why?
No.
I wonder. I've never had Malaysian cuisine.
I have. I've been to Malaysia.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
And it's great.
I mean, it's okay. I was much more of a picky eater then. So, but I managed. I had rice.
Okay.
Chicken.
Imagine that.
There you go.
Rice. Now, Bittner, what race would you be?
I would be South Asian, actually.
All right.
I can't decide between Indian and Pakistani, so I'm just going with South Asian as a subcontinent.
So from
You're
the
Kashmir.
subcontinent.
Basically, yeah.
Now, Morgan, what race would you be?
I think I would be Japanese.
All right. Okay.
Good skincare products.
Okay. Greg?
I can't even. I literally can't even. I kid. No. I would probably choose Italian.
That's not really a race.
Roman,
honestly.
man.
No.
Well, neither was Malaysian or Japanese. They were just countries.
It's different than white. Like,
oh, you mean like? Well, I mean, I'm Native American. I'm kind of like a unicorn.
Oh,
so.
whatever. You're like 1/16th. You're no more Native American than I am. I'm calling bullshit. you, black, Asian, or
Aboriginal North American fascism will not be tolerated. No, I don't know. I guess
Pacific Islander.
Yeah, Pacific Islander. That's what I usually checked on iStep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pro typhoon. So that would be my choice.
So, are you just trying to get closer to my sister?
Oh, does she live out there?
No, she's Pacific Islander.
Is she really?
Yeah.
She doesn't
I
look it
thought
at all.
something was different.
I thought she looked more like Spanish or something like that.
No, we have different dads.
Oh, okay.
So is that how I would get closer to your sister?
To assume her ethnicity?
to become Pacific Islander. Yeah, that's how you would do it.
To date her.
Oh.
Honestly, Trading Bittners is a great TV show. It's one of my favorites.
Flip this Bittner.
Flip this Bittner. All right, now we're goofing off, and that is the subject.
Can I change my answer?
Sure. What would you be?
I want to be Canadian.
No, shut up.
I'm just trying to suck up to dear leader.
No, you wore out your welcome already. We're only 6 minutes into this.
I brought you the nectar of your people.
Not only is he advancing a 5-year-old joke, 6-year-old joke.
I know.
He brought me alcohol.
That's true,
Greg,
from the homeland.
Yeah, from the homeland,
right?
And
made with real red maple leaves.
And he turned down the Tim Hortons.
Well, I wasn't offered a donut. I would have eaten a donut.
The Tim Hortons that we brought back from Lansing for you.
I didn't see it
from Lansing.
You ate that in the car.
Right.
Never mind.
Right. She's gonna like shit it out, and then
Well,
here's the Tim Hortons.
He's keto, so technically, who ate the Hortons?
Oh,
Horton ate a who?
I totally did because I'd never had Tim Hortons before, so I tried it.
Was it good?
Oh, it was delicious. I mean, sugar is still the devil, but it was delicious.
Okay, and you were fine after?
Yeah.
Now you've brought me a gift.
Yes,
of ginger beer.
After the wall party last weekend, I always enjoy breakfast the next morning with Lion Jeremiah Morrill and his lovely girlfriend Sarah Potter, and so we always go to Stacks, a local establishment where everyone comes and fawns over Jeremiah and his power and
literally
County Kingdom. We go into Rural King. They take me to Rural King. I've never been. He does a U.
I've never been.
He does a U. He takes me into Rural King. As we're walking in, there's the mayor in line. Not joking. The mayor of Newcastle in line and shouts out, "Hey, Jeremiah!" Now Miss Potter remains silent, and so I think it's odd. Usually she would, chime in and say, "Hey, how are you?" Turns out she was in either a chili cook-off or a food cook-off, and she had gotten a 92 by one set of judges and 83 by another. but the mayor gave her a 55, and that's the reason she lost.
Ouch.
She was fucking petty.
Wow.
And I mean petty. Didn't talk about it, just beelined, and then I get up and I'm like, hey, why didn't you say anything? She's like, not a fan.
Not a fan.
Didn't like my chili.
Wow. Ugh.
Because she didn't just pass off Skyline as her own.
I know. She trumped him.
We didn't.
Skyline.
We didn't really.
She works
have,
at Gold Star. That's why she wears that on her
Honestly.
shirt.
No,
She's a chili. You're a chili dog aficionado, are you not?
I wouldn't say that. No,
You big chili dog fan, right, Bittner?
I'm from Cincinnati, so I'm a Skyline fan.
Oh, okay.
For the record,
Okay.
not Gold Star, Skyline.
All right.
Okay.
Lenz.
You're allowed. I believe you. I just like to tease you about your love of the white trash chili fast food establishments.
Yeah. I mean, honestly.
I'm sorry, you hate white trash. What should I say?
Oh, I hate that term.
Caucasian poverty, Appalachian chili.
There you go. I hate that term.
Oh, what should I say? Just smelly people.
There you go.
People with no teeth.
Walmart
No.
late night shoppers
There you go.
with
That
their
works.
weird walks.
Residents of Indiana.
They're weird walks.
Oh, wow.
You never gone to Walmart at like 3 a.m.
Oh,
on
I
a night of
have.
insomnia and seen the weird walks that go on down the aisles? Looks like Jurassic Park.
I gotta stop this. I'm having problems over here. Very
So when did he get such a big mic?
A listener sent that.
No,
as a gift.
no. I bought
Oh.
this one. Grandma passed away and left me some money.
No.
So
Do you wish that yours was that
you
size
wish you
or
had
something?
a mic this size?
I don't
No.
understand.
No, I just noticed that it was bigger than everybody else's.
Have you ever seen the ones that where you can
I
just
think
like
he's
sit in the middle
compensating.
and you can speak into it? I always thought those were awesome, but they're pretty expensive.
Yes.
Yeah. No, this is, I'm gonna start a how to podcast thing.
Okay.
And to do that, you can't do it with like you need a mic that looks like
Professional.
Yeah. So, all right, let's get to Dear Leader. Let's deal with Nathan.
Olmsted?
No. Different
Oh,
Nathan. No,
okay, cool, good.
No. This is not him. This is a different Nathan. This is a nice Nathan. You'll like him, I think. Now, Nathan writes, Dear Leader, which you can write Dear Leader at editor@wearelibertarians.com. He writes, Dear Leader, I've been listening to We're Libertarians, the podcast, since back in 2011 before the 2012 presidential election. Fake news because we started March 8th, 2012. But we'll accept it. Thank you for listening for so long. I was just discovering that I was really a libertarian-leaning dude and was looking for educational resources, including podcasts, that could help me get a libertarian perspective on stuff. I'll cut to the chase so I don't waste your time. And as we all know, Dear Leader's time is very important, so do not waste it, listener. I just wanted to make a simple suggestion. There's another 10 paragraphs here. While I do find some of the banter in the beginning of the show pretty funny, and of course we listeners develop a vested interest in the lives of the personality we listen to on the show, I think you often let the banter run on a bit too long, and I find myself drifting and becoming disinterested. How dare you? The show is sometimes
That's why I don't listen.
2.5 hours, which is pretty long, and part of that is because there is a lot of tangential thing. Boy, if we did drops, I would pull that in a heartbeat. Bullshitting mixed in. Some of it adds value to the show because it adds some comic relief to some pretty serious topics, but sometimes it turns into what sounds like bros in a bar talking shit. I suffer through these. Quit shaking your head, Bittner.
That's why I don't listen.
Why did I invite him?
Honestly, I thought it was a setup so I could hit him with my Challenger. Beep, beep.
Having his car towed as we speak. His brand new car that he bought right after he destroyed Jeremiah's.
Yeah. To be fair, he gave us such pleasure by wrecking Jeremiah Morrill's truck that I'm almost glad. I feel bad for Jeremiah and feel bad that you had to spend the money, but that has been so much fun. And we turned you into a verb. Bittnered.
You got Bittnered.
You got Bittnered. Bittner happens. Bittnered.
Yep.
Never Bittner.
Yep.
I suffer through those moments because I really enjoy discussions about the hot issues and love that you provide a logical and reasonable perspective that I can only get via few outlets. I think if you steered the conversation back on track a bit more quickly rather than letting it trail off for several minutes at a time, it would certainly add value and possibly become more attractive to other prospective listeners. I hope you take this as constructive criticism rather than some random dick trying to tear you down. I only want the show to grow and becomes even more popular. Keep up the good work. Nate. Now, Nate, thank you for such a nice and thoughtful letter. You clearly took a lot of time to write this, and I really do appreciate that. But where do you get off? No. This is something Greg and I probably have a conversation about how much, and we call it the goofing off and the autism. And we are constantly having discussions about how to balance the two because, we do something different than any other podcast. You can go and listen to the Red Meat and get it in 20 minutes from Tom Woods every day. Every other political podcast out there does a lot of that in-depth conversation, and we do have a much more unique perspective than I think a lot of other people. But what we are different in that we also give you a look into our lives. We're a little more personal, and it is designed to be sound like bros talking in a bar talking shit. And so the course of the conversation kind of winds in the way that your normal conversation between friends would wind. But I do take your criticism seriously, and I have tried to rein it in. I think if you listen to last week's episode, I tried to steer us back on course.
But the dabs kicked in.
I will say I was not happy with last week's episode. Neither was Tanner. And I apologize because I want us to be as excellent. Every show is incredibly important to Greg and I. Cat, too. But
who?
You're right.
Oh, shit. Sorry.
And everybody who is involved in We Are Libertarians takes this very seriously, except Bittner. And I
don't take anything seriously.
I know, that's true. We do take this kind of criticism seriously. We're not going to change the first 20 minutes. Maybe we could cut it. We could just do interviews with libertarian luminaries and just give you current events analysis, and we could probably grow quicker. But it's not going to have the same effect where you would look forward to every episode like you do when we try and trick Tanner into thinking that he spilled a beer, or James and Tanner talk about
Hank Hill being a cuck.
Hank Hill being a cuck. When we talk about the listeners' favorite moments on the show, those are the things that come up. You don't remember our opinion on North Korea. You remember Tanner being tricked into thinking he spilled a beer. So we do
or that he even was on the podcast.
Because he doesn't remember. But Tanner is fine, by the way. Tanner is okay, and it was much...
Fine strong.
Tanner's Tanner. He's going to be okay. We're big brothering the shit out of him right now. So I do want everybody to not worry too much about him. But do want everybody to know that we constantly are talking about the balance between... the comedy portion and the politics portion.
Our target market's a little bit higher up the funnel of libertarianism. We're trying to draw people in, and then we pass them off down to more serious outlets. Someone like Tom Woods we could never be. We're not Columbia PhDs and never will be.
Nope.
They're students of history, or he's a student of history that's kind of unmatched. And so the more we would try to be like him, the worse we'd fail and the less popular we'd probably be. And honestly, if you're going to get constructive criticism, I don't know about you, Chris, but I have no problem apologizing for my length.
I have absolutely no problem in that area.
I mean, it's something we hear all the time. You guys are so long, and so we are. But we are sorry, but there's not a lot we can do.
You just are constantly... You guys are just overpowering, and it is... It's just the stamina that this podcast has.
We will push a little less hard on our length.
Right. But no, we won't. No, we never will apologize for the thickness of our opinions and the length of our podcast.
Or how deep we go in the issues.
We go very deep.
Exactly. And sometimes, we touch bottom and it hurts.
Right. Sometimes you got to tip a cervix. Now, Morgan, how wet are you right now?
She just made a peanut gallery comment. I'd like to hear that publicly.
What did you say?
I said I was aroused.
Yes, honestly. I mean, how could you not be with the length of this libertarian podcast?
Yeah.
But Nathan, thank you for taking the time to write us in, because the fact that you would spend that much time and thought into writing such a positive, constructive criticism, we much appreciate, and only hope to hear more and hope to improve and do better.
Yeah,
that's why we end every episode with "We promise to do better next time," because we sincerely mean it.
Yeah, we are.
Are we done?
Yep.
Oh, all right.
Awesome.
Look what you did, Nathan, you little jerk.
Here's your opinion.
Made it way short, thanks.
And I'm tossing it in the garbage.
Want a shotgun one? You're doing a good job so far.
She will.
I've never seen someone chug a bottle of Moscato.
Yeah, no, that's not true.
This is a $12 bottle, so it's nice.
Oh, I mean, you bonged it in one gulp. That was impressive.
The last time somebody did that was Caitlin Kopetsky, when she, after the podcast, was so drunk on Moscato that she danced to Genuine's Pony. So we are always trying to improve. So if you ever have constructive criticism on how we can make the show better, we will listen. We have figured out a formula that is making us one of the top libertarian podcasts. I mean, we're up in the top 5 at this point in terms of numbers, and we're coming for number 1.
We self-identify as number 1.
Absolutely. We tell you we're number 1. I want to thank everybody who donates to the show, people who donate via PayPal or Patreon at WeAreLibertarians.com. I counted it up when I sent an email earlier thanking those people. 103 people in the history of We Are Libertarians have been a monthly contributor, donated at one time, or become an advertiser. People like Alex Ramon, Aaron Jones, Aaron Harding, Eric Neff, Dustin Reed, Craig DaCosta has, thanks to Craig DaCosta, Jason Doolittle, Christy Avery, Austin Broderson, you guys especially recently have really come through and helped me as I've bought some software that's going to help us improve the We Are Libertarians website and a few projects that we're working on, including a membership site to thank people like Jason Doolittle and Jennifer Himmelberg and Jeremiah Morrill and Jordan Laycock and
wait, it doesn't feel like you gave Jer his full due there for being a monthly contributor.
I did.
I mean, he has an actual giving level named after him.
He does.
And you just kind of like swept his name under.
There was a tone with
there was
it, too.
there was a definite tone.
Well,
it reeked of anti-Semitism.
I can't help but love Kirk French and Kelly Curran and Josh Neitz and Joseph Tarner and Stacey Perkins. They're all so great. Even Sarah Potter, who is a member of the Jeremiah Morrill Pizza Society, which is a monthly contribution of $7. So we will never forget the time that Jared got mad at me for something that was not my fault. When he made me give my last $7 to my name to him as he forced friendship on me. Made me go to Giacomo's and get pizza with him, and then was insulted after...
He poverty-shamed you.
After I told him 3 times, listen, bro, I only have $7. And he goes... When I handed it to him, he goes, you're serious? I was like, yeah. Sorry about that $30 pizza. You wanted me to come. So...
Shekels in Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
I'm impressed. The records you have here are better than what you had when you were running the Libertarian Party.
Absolutely. That's because we have a database.
Trigger.
we have actual software now.
That's actually not as much of an indictment on him as the pain that we kind of mutually went through.
Yeah.
Some of that.
So,
You're
Joe...
indentured servitude, so to speak.
Joe Benavidez. Listen, if I say your last name, I'm going to get it wrong.
It's Benavidez.
Andre Myrick, Ken Walker, Eric Anderson, Toby Stoltz-Fuss, Ryan Graham. You guys are awesome. Todd Singer especially, and Rick Irvine helped donate to close the gap on some of the membership software that I had to buy and the new templates and all that stuff. So thank you to those guys. Thank you. I didn't mention everybody's name, but you guys are all-stars, and it's very much appreciated. Unlike whispering in the middle of a radio program. Now, can you please text like a normal 21-year-old Morgan?
Wait, what do you mean?
I know he's like 43 and probably doesn't know.
I wish he was 43.
You can reach him at Brett at Bittner at CompuServe.net.
Right. AOL.
Hey, wait. I'm not Sam Goldstein.
That's
you
true.
guys.
That's true. The technology chair of the National Party
has an AOL account.
$24.99 a month. Hell of a deal.
If you send your AOL email discs to Sam Goldstein, he can get a great deal. We make fun of him because he keeps picking
cut you a deal on insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
a deal.
So now let's get into the current events.
If only something major had been going on in America right now.
I haven't heard anything.
Something has been happening?
I know.
I haven't seen the news.
I mean, we could talk about the trade bill that's trying to make it through and infrastructure improvements, but I feel like, I don't know that this is going to be an easy sell.
No, we're in full-scale race wars at this point.
There we go.
Wow.
We got a race war going on.
And not the Fast and the Furious version.
Essentially, we're going to discuss today how did the most multicultural, multi-ethnic generation in history end up in a full-scale race war. I don't know how we got here, but we're there, and I think it's a really interesting topic. We were going to talk.
I blame Greg.
We had planned, we've been working on a series where we're going to go through and define the political movements. We're going to define certain policies and really kind of give you an in-depth look into the libertarian movement, the conservative movement, how different policies work. So it's just going to be a very clean, very simple look.
And Matt did a ton of hard work. Your notes were fantastic, by the way, and I so appreciate it. Like, they were outstanding.
Matt spent so
Very
much
autistic.
time working
Much
on this.
screeching.
Yeah, it was great. And then somebody drove a Charger into a group of black people.
It was a Challenger, I'll have you know. Anybody can have a Charger. Challengers, though.
Now, I don't even know where to begin. So let's start with
I
what...
believe it was an
plenty more
Ohio
that
man
too,
as well that was driving that Challenger.
But he
An
probably
Ohio
liked
man.
That's right, because they
Gold
checked the
Star.
registration.
He was-
4chan weaponized all over it and pulled up the public documents and then said that didn't have a sunroof and immediately thought it was a conspiracy.
So essentially, a group called Unite the Right was organized by Jason Kessler, and he a few days ago organized this rally, and he's an alt-right person. Alt-right,
He's a radical traditionalist, I think, is how he defines himself.
right. Let's define some of these terms because there's a lot of different movements. When we say alt-right, what exactly is alt-right?
That's when
Greg?
you press the Alt button and the right arrow, right?
Thank
Yes,
you.
and then
Take your puns.
take your puns and try to dodge the dodge.
This is really not funny, Greg. We shouldn't be joking like this.
I know, it's too soon.
But
Too soon.
the memes, man. The memes have been so
No,
good.
but so I mean, the alt-right's it's not clearly defined by any means because if you believe the opposition, then you can lump the president's strategic advisor Steve Bannon into the alt-right as sort of the founder and spearheaded. He's not the philosophical leader by any means, but he's clearly someone.
I don't
who
mean
is,
to interrupt, Greg, but is that a tiki torch out there on Spangle's patio?
Yes.
Just checking.
See, these are
pretty well used too, huh?
Just checking.
these are the tangenitals that people are talking about.
First they come for the Nazis, then the party members. No, but so Steve Bannon would be someone who, if you believe the opposition, he is the titular head, the unappointed head of the alt-right, and someone that is kind of a unapologetic ethno-nationalist, I guess you could say. He's absolutely a radical nationalist, and for the first time in American politics in our lifetimes, it's the first time someone's experienced that. But you would have to go back to Paul Gottfried would probably be the first real mainstream alt-right philosophical founder. Wouldn't you agree?
He's the first to have, from my reading, used the term alt-right,
Yeah.
right? And he falls into the paleo-conservative wing of the conservative movement.
He's someone who he didn't get hit by the John Birch fallout of the Republican redefinition in the 50s and 60s, but he definitely wasn't easily. People didn't associate with him very willingly.
Right.
So a lot of when conservatism got redefined, a lot of people fell out of the mainstream after Goldwater's election that were a lot of the Goldwater caucus. They were the people who, their famous ad against Goldwater, "This isn't my Republican Party." And so Gottfried sort of kept that ragtag band of misfit toys together in the right, and they became the alternative right. And then Richard Spencer came along and really popularized the term.
He owned the name.
He
He
did.
came and said, "This is what it is."
And he basically said, if you don't follow him, you're not alt-right.
Exactly.
Like, it's an exclusive club.
He owns it.
Right.
He owns it. And the thing is, they have been much more willing to associate, include, and court organizations that are publicly, admittedly Nazi sympathetic at minimum and actual Nazis at
So groups like
maximum.
Stormfront and
A Daily Storm
League of the
is
South.
a Daily Stormer.
Daily Stormer is the newspaper.
I won't
for
allow you
Stormfront.
to throw the League of the South in there. That's a hate organization by the Southern Law and Poverty Center, but so is Charles Murray.
So,
You don't get to just toss that in there because you're friends with the national chair.
Oh, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
we'll get there. Oh, we'll wait.
The League of the South is someone that believes the Civil War was a war of northern aggression.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be kind of the thread. Like when you talk about this Jason Kessler who started the Unite the Right rally.
He's not all that different than Jack, the Southern Avenger, Jack
What's
Hunter.
his face? Jack Hunter.
Yeah. He's not that much different than him. He was another League of the South member.
See when he has that douchey smile on his face? Like, what?
It wasn't all that long ago the Libertarian movement, and especially Liberty Republicans, claimed Jack Hunter, and he worked for Rand Paul.
He did.
He did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Ron
After
Paul,
being the Southern
now
Avenger.
Jeffrey Tucker once ghostwrit some beautiful newsletters for Ron Paul that were used to fundraise.
Right.
Are you sure that it was
I don't
Jeffrey
think it was Tucker.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I'm pointing the finger. You heard it here first. I've got the documents.
hey,
I've
if you've
been
got
through the compressed data.
If
No.
you've got the document.
Now, Morgan, please pick up that microphone.
Yes.
How do you deal with the passive aggressiveness? because
I was just over here smiling.
I call him out on it a lot because it's rather annoying, you know, and he acts like he knows something that you don't, you know,
right?
And it's like I doubt it.
As the only person in this
like
room
states' rights,
who's actually met Jack Hunter,
yes, the Southern Avenger,
So that makes you racist.
Oh, okay.
Basically,
By association.
I mean,
by association,
guilty by association. Brett.
he knows Tom Woods. That's what I heard.
Right? I heard he's
Woods to Hunter to Bittner. I can add these things up.
We'll get there. Let's
we'll
focus.
get there.
So
Okay,
focus.
let's
So
on this
the
event.
alt-right is specifically they've started identifying themselves as classical traditionalists. A traditional way, they adhere to the customs they believe made the United States great, and more so than those
are they trying to
principles,
make
the
America
skin
great
color.
again?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
They're not. That's not.
Just checking.
That's not their goal. Their goal is they feel like they're under attack by cultural change. So they are a natural result of feeling oppressed by multiculturalism and what they perceive to be radical change in things in gender, in reassignment surgeries. I mean, they feel like they're under attack because they very much adhere to a Judeo-Christian worldview. And yet, instead of taking those principles, they take away that it's the skin color that makes it preferable rather than the principles that make it preferable and allow the United States to succeed. They draw the wrong lessons. And as they feel more, as people start to threaten to tear down monuments, as the city council voted to democratically remove, and they even renamed the park that it's in, right? Do you guys, do you know what it was named before? By chance in Charlottesville?
No, I don't.
It's Emancipation Park now. But that was that one proclamation that Lincoln made declaring them war property.
But only in the 11 states that he didn't have any control over at the time.
Correct. Sort of like I guess you could say a state chair over his county chairs in the LPIN, a state proclamation, and then they all make the decision collectively.
Formerly Lee Park.
Yeah, Lee Park.
Yeah,
it was Robert E. Lee Park.
Robert E. Lee Park, yeah.
Who was
interesting. That's kind of a thorn in the eye for a public park.
TBH, he was less racist than Abraham Lincoln.
Agreed.
So,
well, history remembers it differently.
Right.
Yep.
I know, but he was less racist than.
Did you know that when I lived in Alabama, I found out that MLK Day is also Robert E. Lee Day?
Really?
Yeah.
It's like IUPUI.
It's the same holiday.
Was it started in like the 60s as a knee-jerk
50s,
type?
60s, yeah.
Yeah, as like
it was
a
to
knee-jerk.
It was to remind black people of their place.
Put them in the place, yeah.
And in the same reason, I mean, it was the same impetus that you saw a lot of the statues that we see that are now being taken down, a lot of the memorials, a lot of the things, the parks.
Yeah.
The
battle
correct
flags,
naming of
for
things.
example. You saw that in my former home, the state of Georgia used to have the Confederate battle flag as part of theirs, starting in 1956 until Roy Barnes's first term or only term as governor.
Yeah.
Was he a Republican or Democrat?
Democrat. He was the last Democrat.
So he was the ones that didn't write Jim Crow.
Sure.
Well, the Democrats wrote Jim Crow.
So essentially,
Lincoln freed their slaves.
Let's talk about the monuments for a minute before we get to this, because I'm for turning these all into gravel. To be honest, like, I don't know if you saw Mitch Landrieu's speech, which is, I think, one of the best speeches in this decade, where he talked about the removal. He's the mayor of New Orleans, and he talked about the removal of these statues in New Orleans, and essentially said, yeah, they are Southern heritage, but this is a heritage that we shouldn't celebrate. This is the denial of freedom and liberty for 400 years for a group of human beings that were systematically murdered, and then once freed, continued to be systematically murdered, and then these were instituted in public squares
with public tax dollars.
Public tax dollars to remind black people that they were still second-class citizens, and they are actually symbols of the South's white supremacist heritage, and therefore they shouldn't be on public land. If you want to build white supremacist symbols, then build them on your own private land. But as for the mayor and the city council, they're tearing them down and they're taking them out. And I didn't really have an opinion on it because I love history and I look at it and I go, I don't know, I haven't really thought of this. This seems controversial. I don't want to deal with this right now. But then I watched that 20-minute speech. We posted it on We Are Libertarians' Facebook page. You can also get it on YouTube. Just look up Mitch Landrieu. Landrieu, and it's a fantastic speech, and I think that it will do for you what it did for me. It gave me a prosecutorial mindset towards these statues, and definitely left me without reasonable doubt that they should be torn down.
So the only issue that I took with the way that Landrieu and others have talked about the statues is they only focus on some. And I see this as we basically have two ways to go. One, we're going to see that this is a slippery slope, and we're going to start removing statues of, say, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, who owned slaves.
Right.
Despite them having been some of the leaders in changing the culture.
They were very progressive for that era.
They were very progressive for that era.
Context. You're stuck by your context of the area you're in.
But then you also have, and this is the thing for me that really strikes, is that should we really be glorifying anyone for their perceived leadership, for their, I mean, let's face it, we have statues of Lenin in Seattle.
Yes, I think that's as offensive as any statue you could build in the United States.
And so
however,
for me,
I mean,
you
there
have
are
those two competing paths that we can go down. We can either take them all down, which I'm actually in favor of, the idea of no longer utilizing the state to reinforce
the history that the state wants.
Yeah,
right. Because eventually, what you're going to see is that you're going to see a rewriting of history.
Yeah, whitewashing of history.
If you allow only certain things to be removed. But I also see that, I remember the cheering when I was in a restaurant or bar when the big Saddam Hussein statue in Iraq was toppled by the American troops. And so I'm thinking about it in a very similar context. If we just took them all away, then we wouldn't have to worry about the messages that we're sending. We wouldn't have to worry about virtue signaling. We wouldn't have to worry about whitewashing history, because we wouldn't have the state determining for us what our history should be, and we can actually learn for ourselves what it actually is.
Matt?
Yeah. I mean, I think we can look. I saw as I was preparing for today. Bradley Balco hit my feed, and an article he wrote a little while ago, I think, and in the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, Eastern Bloc countries such as Hungary, Lithuania, special place in my heart, right? I mean, they have taken these statues down. Even in Russia, they have taken these statues down and, relegated them, sometimes to special purposes to help, this is a moment in history, and it's part of history, and we shouldn't completely whitewash it away, right? But it's now, I think there is one where there's a statue of Lenin, but then also a bunch of marble severed heads, right? That symbolize the gulags, right? That was going on. So, I think that is a great compromise and a great way forward as to how we can continue to, we don't want to forget this history, but, at the same time, proclaiming it and promoting it in the public square. I hear where, Brett, you're coming from, right? But I mean, let's face it, most of these statues are going to be, we're not talking about, the Washington Monument here. We're talking about small public parks and, towns across America, right? And so, I don't think it's appropriate for sweeping, federal legislation to say get rid of it, but I think the right thing to do is for each of these individual municipalities to make their own decisions.
What we could do is we could sell it to private individuals who want to maintain that history.
Absolutely.
And
that
then
should be
kill two birds with one stone.
That should be part of the process.
But we're still arguing the Ten Commandments. I mean, and the Supreme Court has so long decided that it is a violation of people's religious rights. And even though I'm a Christian, and I think, are you an atheist, Bittner?
All left libertarians are atheists.
Exactly right. He's a godless commie. No, I mean, if you're an atheist, I totally get why you wouldn't want public dollars being used to promote the Ten Commandments. Makes total sense to me. I agree with you. Because I don't need the state to put forth this ideology that they're the protector of religion in America. It's Thomas Jefferson is one of the greatest authors of liberty.
Yes.
I mean, he is somebody who yes, he had slaves. He freed all of his slaves. He made love to his slaves. He had children with his slaves.
That's actually in doubt. Now that
Really?
they've done some DNA testing, it looks like it might have been his nephew that was
Yeah.
actually the
Or
one who
his brother.
fathered the children with Sally Hemings and some of her descendants.
There you go, whitewashing
And
history.
she was a half-sister of Jefferson's wife.
Correct.
Yes.
And willed to them when Martha's father passed.
Yeah.
So society is always evolving, and there is no excuse for slavery. There's no excuse for the systematic racism of Sheriff Clark in the 1960s against protesters, or Bull Connor. There is no excuse for any of it.
Or Robert Byrd.
Or Robert Byrd.
Yeah. Or George Wallace standing in the doors blocking the entrance to the University of Alabama.
The entire human story is marching towards freedom and progressing towards freedom. And our forefathers made mistakes, and they were, in some cases, terrible people, in other ways, complicated people. And I think that part of the beauty of the internet age and the part of the beauty of the millennials is that we're always trying to make society more tolerant, more open, more understanding, but there's always going to be racists. There's always going to be bigots. There's always going to be people on the left or the right or in the libertarian movement or in the conservative movement or wherever or in your office.
In the White House.
Or the White House that hate other people for whatever reason, the color of their skin, their ideology. And
Pure and simple, just how they're raised.
And I want to invoke Jeffrey Tucker because I took the opportunity to go back and reread his Against Libertarian Brutalism, because as the one of the starters of these libertarian brutalist groups that Greg became the king of,
I closed it.
You literally
I decimated it.
You decimated it because you were so savage.
Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, and I needed to break apart their hate.
So in 2014, in response to this article, a bunch of Facebook groups got started, but where it was just in vogue to say the most offensive thing you possibly could
to see what the limits were.
And
then liberty shame somebody.
Somebody added James Neese, and then he took over the group, and then someone gave him admin rights, and he shut down the main brutalism group. And then we
did change it from the inside. I don't mean to put a tip of the old cap on this, but it is possible.
They fled to another group, and then someone added Greg, and he started wrestling, and then he closed the group and blew it up after he put one of the main protagonists' child's face on a fleshlight.
I asked if there was anything I could do that would upset people. They said, you can't do anything that will upset these people. Turns out they were wrong.
Making a sex toy out of a child is apparently offensive.
I asked.
Who knew?
I asked.
Who knew?
So
it's not like I did it without saying, guys, I will accommodate your, weak class jimmies. Just tell me where the boundaries are.
So the Morgan just discovered the Instagram post I made of her as she was trying to decide what to read. So go ahead, you can speak. Do you have a microphone? We're not anti-female. I zoomed in on your ass?
Yes.
No, I was zooming in on the bookshelf.
No, it was at the end, and it was my ass.
I was zooming in on Greg. Look at him. Look how cute he is.
He wasn't in the frame at all. It was my ass.
Well, if you go to our Instagram, you can decide for yourself at We Are Libertarians. Or go to our private Facebook group.
Let's not start protesting and getting out.
Honestly, take your into FIFA ass and get out.
You're more millennial, though, than any of us, right? So,
no,
clearly
she's
Gen not a millennial.
I'm Gen Z, actually.
Yeah.
Gen Z. So, but I'm sure that your Facebook feed is entirely different than ours, obviously.
Well, I use Twitter because I'm not, 35.
Yeah, exactly. Use a different platform because you're younger.
Yeah. Right.
So like
doesn't
on
have
Twitter,
that old man smell, right, Brad?
Exactly.
Isn't it annoying when you date a younger woman and she thinks that hurts your feelings?
Wait, that he has an old man smell?
No, that you're just the old jokes.
Oh.
He doesn't have the old man smell. He smells great. He
Old
smells like
Spice
bacon.
is fire now.
I do smell like bacon.
Yeah,
that's true.
all the time.
All the time.
It smells like smoked meat and bacon. Honestly, I'm moist.
And whiskey.
And whiskey. Yeah, you forgot the whiskey.
But
so surely your your Twitter stream is wildly different composition than ours. What for you, and you're not necessarily libertarian, what are your thoughts on this whole fiasco?
Is
it mass outrage at all points from everyone in your age group?
Basically, yeah, and then you have a few people who classify themselves as like Trump supporters, and they're kind of like they're basically like neo-Nazis. Not Trump supporters in general, but the people that I'm talking about.
As close to that mic as you can. You talk softly.
Okay. Sorry, is this okay?
Yeah,
okay,
that's good.
But for me, my take on this is with tearing down the statues. It's kind of like in Germany they don't have statues to commemorate the Holocaust.
It's a crime to do Sieg Heil.
Yeah, so.
And it's also a crime to sing the first verse of Deutschland über alles.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh. So I kind of I hadn't thought about the whole like tax dollar perspective, and that's why I hang out with libertarians because and
their memes are fire.
Yeah, that too. So I think that's definitely an interesting perspective, and it's kind of like just if people really want those statues, let them buy them, let them take care of them themselves, and just
Are you okay with community decision making on it? If it's community level funding and decision making, or no?
No, not really, because there's going to be people like, what if the community is just like the majority is white
racist.
And they're racist, and there's like enough black people that they don't get to make a decision on it. It's just kind of like
wait, you
that's
mean
the problem
direct
with
democracy doesn't work?
Basically, yeah.
The God that failed.
Yeah.
Physical removal.
So that's something you would oppose then too. So
Yeah.
you really would primarily agree with like let's put them up, sell them to any private buyer, and rather than having any memorials or any type of statutes that are publicly funded by the collective, make it where they're private donations and housed in private locations.
Yeah, because I think that in a way that contains some of the racism, and the only way that you really can is let the racist be racist and try to keep them to themselves.
Right.
Actually, I'd like to jump in to follow up what she said. You're actually seeing in Atlanta and in the state of Georgia where they're talking about sandblasting Stonewall Jackson, Alexander Stevens, and Jefferson Davis off of Stone Mountain because it is a government-owned park.
Is it federal or state?
Honestly,
State.
wouldn't it be cheaper just to erect a statue of Sherman?
Previously,
Fire
it was
is so much cheaper. I'm just saying.
It was a
Atlantans.
private park, and then it became.
Then they actually acquired it and then used public funds to subsidize the Mount Rushmore of the Confederacy.
And so basically what you could do is go the opposite way, just sell it back off. But they're talking about now legislation to clear the carving off of Stone Mountain.
With public funds?
With public funds because it is a or with taxpayer funds because it's a taxpayer.
Honestly, I don't think you'd ever find a donor who would. You couldn't do a GoFundMe or Kickstarter who would pay for the sandblasting of Stone Mountain. I would guess.
You might be able.
Maybe
to find
Bezos or someone like Gates or somebody like that.
Well, so let me circle,
Soros actually. Yeah,
let me circle back to some of the brutalism stuff, because one of the main characters in all this was Chris Cantwell, who was the founder of these brutalist groups where everybody was encouraged.
Prominent LARPer in New Hampshire.
Major LARPer, hung out with a lot of people, but is just an all-around intolerable human being. And I don't know how people were ever friends with him. I found him to be gross and intolerable. He was somebody who lived in his van. For somebody who's in the alt-right, he had a gay phase and was openly gay for a while, I think. Which is fine, but like, put that on your signs as you march with all these Nazis.
Make that a threat on Daily Stormer.
Right. Like he mocked when this one guy was arrested for child molestation, who was a prominent member in the Libertarian movement, like said the worst thing that he put in his daughter was his leftist ideology. Like, yeah, that's a post that I put on the We Are Libertarians Facebook group, accessible on WeareLibertarians.com.
I've tried to distance us from the Free State Project for a very long time for a reason.
Listen,
I didn't want us showing up in a Vice documentary.
There's great people, and there's Roger Paxton, and then there's this dude. And I've never heard him talk. He talks like such a weirdo. And
Wait, just to be clear, is Roger Paxton one of the good people?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yes,
He's the kind white supremacist.
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if you were
kidding.
angling
Totally
for a new public apology, so I was just trying to figure out.
I actually have become a monthly contributor on his Patreon to the Lava Flow.
Excellent podcast.
After he shamed you into it?
No, he donated to us for a while. Now I'm donating to Roger, and I'm donating
Cross-subsidy.
to Lions of Liberty. I'm donating to Jen Gray at Leading Liberty, and our
Oh, are you?
Jen, shut up. Jen, now Johnny Rocket Launchpad, who has a great new comic book called The Liberty Force.
Can't recommend it enough. It's fantastic.
Forward by Tom Woods.
I was going to ask who the forward was by.
So you can go check that out if you want. It's a really cool comic book available at JohnnyRocketLaunchpad.com. Give the comic book to the child and let her read it over. Now,
wow.
Jeffrey Tucker wrote this an article in 2014. It's on fee.org, and you can just Google "Against Libertarian Brutalism." And this set the libertarian world on fire and started all these groups where everybody would get super offensive. And I just want to read a couple little excerpts because I think Jeffrey nailed a lot of what's going on now long before he identified these threads, long before any of us really got there. He writes, "Why should we favor human liberty over a social order ruled by power? In providing the answer, I would suggest that libertarians can generally be divided into two camps, the humanitarians and brutalists. The humanitarians are drawn to reasons such as the following. Liberty allows peaceful human cooperation. It inspires the creative service of others. It keeps violence at bay. It allows for capital formation and prosperity. It protects human rights of all against invasion. It allows human associations of all sorts to flourish on their own terms. It socializes people with rewards toward getting along rather than tearing each other apart, and leads to a world in which people are valued as ends in themselves rather than fodder in the central plan. We all know this from history and experience. These are all great reasons to love liberty. But they are not the only reasons that people support liberty. There is a segment of the population which self-described libertarians described here as brutalists who find all of the above rather boring, broad, and excessively humanitarian. To them, what's impressive about liberty is that it allows people to assert their individual preferences, to form homogenous tribes, to work out their biases in action, to ostracize people based on politically incorrect standards, quote-unquote, to hate to their heart's content so long as no violence is used as a means, which is exactly word for word what Chris Cantwell said in that Vice documentary.
We're not aggressive, but if you're aggressive toward us, we will effing kill you.
And to shut down people based on their demographics or political opinions, to be openly racist and sexist, to exclude and isolate and be generally malcontented with modernity, and to reject civil standards of values and etiquette in favor of antisocial norms.
Gosh, I wonder who he's talking about there.
These two impulses are radically different. And I think that he beautifully captures what you see about Chris Cantwell and the other alt-right people that were featured in the Vice documentary that has gone viral. I'll look up the title and let you guys know what it is, but
Charlottesville, something?
Yeah, exactly. I posted it on my Facebook. But, I mean, the takeaway from that is that I don't identify with anybody who was in Charlottesville. I don't identify with the left. I don't identify with the right. I don't identify with the reporter.
You wanted to date the documentary maker, let's be clear.
She was weird.
She was one of those mousy liberals that you just love.
I'm into it. Charlottesville, Race and Terror, Vice News Tonight on HBO. Yeah, like it was very, just like the left after the car thing was just so over the top and ridiculous. And the people like Chris Cantwell couldn't have been more of a disgusting human being. Like he gives me the willies. And like all these guys are just gross. And
usually I'm when I see somebody that lives in a van, I'm just like, look at this guy.
Right.
This is an impressive individual. But he just totally destroyed the stereotype I've had of van living people.
The old dude from the Daily Stormer was pretty.
Oh my God!
Crazy.
When he said we've effectively organized our memes, I about jumped out of my chair because I thought, oh my God.
We've taken the internet and gone viral now. We're in real life. Like it was so crazy.
Meme magic.
But and I had a conversation. I met my first KKK Nazi member at a guy named Andy who went to the Charlottesville rally, who I met in Martinsville, Indiana. Those from Indiana will
of all the gin joints in all the world.
And Andy is a very bright man, but also someone who is completely incapable of participating in society in any effective way. Somebody who is a dangerous person, but only when he gets out of control and has a psychic break.
In a mob mentality.
He's somebody who is violently, abused in so many different ways over the course of the years. And he's just generally a terrible, awful person, and he's pathetic. Like, he's a pathetic degenerate. And when I walked away from that experience, meeting my first Nazi member, KKK member, I went, why am I afraid of these guys? They're pathetic. And when I watched that, I saw those same people marching in Charlottesville who are just pathetic. And when I talk to people who are friends and identify with the alt-right, I go, walk me through what you believe.
Pitch me.
And when that happens, when I actually engage in a dialogue with these people, I go, oh, well, you can tell me you're not a white supremacist, but you're clearly saying things that, like, Haiti's a defective country because it's run by black people and not whites. Like, well, that means that you think black people are defective degenerates and you're a white supremacist. Like, the very ideology that you espouse is racism and superiority because of skin color, which is just fucking retarded.
So wait, what you're saying is that people can have a belief system and not actually identify as something, but could still be that something?
I don't know what you mean, Bittner. Explain yourself.
There could be a white black supremacist like Clayton Bigsby.
No.
No. Bittner's doing the Bittner. Just say it, dude.
The art of the Bittner?
Right.
No, I mean, I'm just pointing out that you identified somebody who doesn't self-identify as a white supremacist, but when you look at their belief system, it's clear that that is what they believe, but they don't have the balls to come out and say it.
Is there anything that you'd like to say to the audience, Brett?
No,
Would you like to confess anything?
No.
We know you're from Georgia.
Nothing at all.
We know you're from Georgia. We know that you...
Not all slave owners are white supremacists.
Right.
Brett.
So,
I'm standing up for you here. I'm championing your cause.
Yeah.
Would you also...
You love sweet tea. You sip mint juleps. You wear a white suit and sit on your front porch.
But see,
I'm just saying...
Isn't it weird, Brett, that when
It's
I
seersucker,
was saying...
Thank you very much.
it's after Labor Day, of course.
Of course.
I was saying that if you give someone a platform to espouse their ideas and then you end up exposing them, you agreed with that premise, then that it doesn't necessarily associate you by guilt. You seem to agree with that, Brett. You also, earlier in the program, might I add into evidence for a future discussion, basically went along the lines of saying that you shouldn't judge people by every choice they made in their past because history's complicated. You seem to. I wish I didn't have a cat in my face because then I would explain what you said exactly.
Is that the thing
but
you wrote down?
When I have a cat in my face, I just get so.
I just want to grab it, and I don't know why.
Yes, don't touch it, Bittner. You're allergic. She'll go.
I took my...
You took your Claritin? Okay. Please.
Xyzal, by the way. Works way
All right.
You probably never heard of it.
Oh, she is
Probably
going to
never heard of
bite
it.
you so hard, Morgan. She is not happy.
She's actually Adolf Hitler.
Oh, look at the poster behind you. Yeah.
Yep.
She's very, very racist. Not a fan of Harry at all.
Well, I mean, what's the point? So, are we saying that I am at the point where I would just go ahead and say that the Unite the Right rally was, at the end of the day, a white supremacy rally. I don't think radical traditionalist is remotely... I mean, unless you're referring to the Confederacy, then...
So Chris shared a good the podcast
Lions
Lions of Liberty podcast, and I listened to it on the way here. And there was an independent reporter who was there on the ground in Charlottesville, and it sounds like there certainly were elements who were not truly white supremacists.
Augustus Invictus was there.
Okay, that doesn't count. Really?
Isn't he a party member?
Yes.
I believe he officially quit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he has resigned his membership and is running for the U.S. Senate nomination in Florida as a Republican against Rick Scott in the primary for 2018.
I'm sure he'll do wonderfully.
I'm sure he will.
I believe there were elements of the broad, quote, Unite the Right coalition who probably do not deserve to be thrown into the fascist, racist, white supremacist, nationalist, etc. bucket. However,
when you stand that close,
you're standing awful close, and the other thing that strikes me, and again we'll kind of come to some of this a little bit later in the conversation, I think, but Gottfried himself still kind of takes the term alt-right. right? I mean, he
doesn't disavow it whatsoever.
But he phrases it in the most recent thing I heard as just a smear. It's become now a smear to describe the entire independent right. In other words, the non-establishment right. And so there is a lot of that out there.
And they're more prevalent than ever. That
group is by far the group that, if you want to talk about who Trump is empowering, that actually wields political power, that is definitely a group that does.
It's Stephen Miller. Bad as Steve Bannon is, Steve Miller.
No, Miller is worse.
Him and Richard Spencer co-chaired the Conservative.
I'm sorry, I got Miller and Spencer confused. Yes.
So they were co-chairs of that, and they have been doing this. They're white supremacy hipsters. They've been doing this way before it was electable or cool in America. And the anti-immigrant stance originates from Stephen Miller.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's a long history of xenophobia in the U.S.
Oh yeah, I just mean with that became like a lot of Trump's platform. He had, a huge hand in authoring and really putting together the terminology and the defense of it by turning it into "Why do you hate American workers?"
Exactly.
Like we did with Jim Acosta.
Yeah.
Jim. He's your cosmopolitan worldview. He's even using terminology that dates back to the Soviet Union and anti-Bolshevism.
Right.
This guy is a radical traditionalist, if there is one. And this is, he doesn't talk about his affiliation with Spencer, clearly, because then the president would have to do even more disavowing, if that's even possible at this point. But,
I'd just say more things about both sides.
Right. Well, Antifa's just as bad. They originate in post-Hitler, and they were every bit as radical and awful in Germany after Hitler as
Italy,
the right
actually, right alongside Mussolini.
Those are the OG fascists. Who is it? Franco? Yeah, was it Franco in Spain?
Franco.
Franco's in Spain.
Yeah, and so a lot of these anti-fascists that came around in the 30s and 40s, is really when they hit their peak. They were the resistance, and they were the radical anti-resistance in the form of violence. They were going to put a bat to the skull of the fascists they hated. And so it's natural that when violence begets violence. And so it's only time. Mm-hmm. It was only time before they arrived here, really.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. And honestly, when you look at the way they dress and the way they behave,
these are not people to worry about.
Yeah.
Like when I watched the Vice documentary, I just was like, okay, these are all freaks. All of these people are freaks. The Antifa.
They're marginalized, outraged, Occupy type people on both sides with different, ideologies.
I don't know about you, Brett. Like, did you see the Vice thing?
I haven't.
You haven't? Okay.
Oh boy, you have to.
You have to.
If I've ever seen an endorsement for the Free State Project, it is that.
Would you leave them alone?
I'm telling you, Free Talk Live, it was basically porn for them. No, it was absolutely as atrocious as anything I've ever seen.
They're just despicable, gross people, but they're
if you have any affiliation or have ever been on the record of supporting Chris Cantwell, oh boy, did your chickens come home to roost.
Man, am I glad Maya's not around anymore.
Precisely.
Yeah. It just, because Tucker nailed it. Like, I want to be around humanitarians. I want the people that come on this podcast, for a time we let those kind of people on who were part of that, because what we try to do is understand every aspect of the libertarian movement and the world. But I just am at a point in my life where I don't want to surround myself with people who are not trying to make themselves better and humanity better.
They're looking for a justification to seclude themselves away from people they don't like.
Absolutely.
And that was what I noticed after the brutalism split, is they became, the hardcore brutalists became alt-right, and they did so quickly. They got radicalized very quickly on forums like 4chan and 8chan, on the poll board specifically. And what started out as people who claimed to be black and yellow in the name of hating government all of a sudden became radical traditionalists trying to preserve the invasion of multiculturalism and political correct behavior. Mm-hmm. Cultural Marxist revolution, anti-cultural Marxist revolutionaries. In the name of skin color, though. Not in the name of principle.
Right.
And so, to me, that when you spend all this time trying to claim, well, it's about the application of force, and then the second all of a sudden it becomes not taboo to start saying things that were, you attach your cart to that horse and then just go down the rabbit well, or the rabbit hole. I mean,
well works too.
Or yeah, sorry. When you go down the Free State rabbit hole. No, and they became radicalized quickly and are unapologetic and very vocal on Facebook and a lot of other internet platforms. It was stunning because that, to me, exposed the right-left libertarian split within the party and the Free State Project and a lot of the movement, because the second they had the chance to attach their cart to racism, they did.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then they had an intellectual defense for it.
And I would say that Adam Kokesh is on deck. I'm calling it here. He's the next to join the alt-right.
He's a Russian plant.
So I don't feel like before we dive into the Libertarian Party split, because it all this seeped into the LP and the Libertarian movement at large this week. Should we talk? There's a theory.
There's a lot to talk about.
Well, there's a theory going around that this Kessler guy. I saw the WorldNet Daily, which is not a credible news source.
To the CNN of internet sources.
Right. It's probably Jerome Corsi reporting live from the scene. He said that he voted for Obama in 2011, and there's a lot of people going around that this Kessler guy, who Unite the Right is actually a Soros front, and that he funded this protest.
Oh, is that the one about the staffing agency that was hiring political protesters a week before?
Yes, and that
ridiculous.
This Kessler guy is actually... But it doesn't matter. If he did do that, was provide honey to bees. It was clearly tens of thousands. It wasn't tens of thousands. It was hundreds and hundreds of racists. I mean, it was just hundreds and hundreds of Nazi sympathizers who joined.
I'd be stunned if there weren't shills within that crowd.
But I mean, Bittner's a shill within the Libertarian Party.
A CIA plant.
Say that, Matt.
I said Bittner's a shill within the Libertarian Party.
Absolutely,
right. Nobody's more statist than Bittner.
Right. I just want Bittner to know that we do like you. We are hard on you.
We're very happy you defeated diabetes.
We're happy that you're alive.
What would we
do? They can keep making fun.
Exactly.
Then we
have to go through the process of finding a new person to pick on. It would be.
I know it would be terrible.
I offered you a keto podcast, did I not?
Yes, and I've been very lazy and haven't had the opportunity to record,
maybe if you had carbs, you'd have energy.
It's not an energy thing. That's not a problem at all.
It's a 21-year-old girlfriend thing. I get it. Nothing? None of your business.
The chili capital of the world.
If you were paying attention, you'd know.
Did you know that Skyline is keto?
Skyline is keto.
Totally. It's
really?
like the only chili out there that is. Because there are no beans.
Right. Beans aren't keto.
Trump deported them.
You can't.
What? Here we go. Tell us, chili expert.
Oh, well, you can get the chili with beans, and also you can't have
It's a five-way.
Yeah, exactly. You can't have any of the spaghetti with the chili, so you can never have a three-way or
but
four-way.
then that's like
a can of
We're talking about chili.
That defeats the Skyline
We're talking about chili.
Cincinnati premise anyway. Yeah, I didn't know where you were going.
No, you made the valid point that what he gets at Skyline is really just the topping. With none of the fixings.
It's like
not
getting
really
cheese
Skyline.
instead of getting a whole pizza.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he just peels the top layer off.
No, I just don't have him put it in the bowl for me.
Okay.
Well, he has them cut up the hot dogs.
I do have him cut up the hot dogs
for
like
him.
on 5.
I would.
It's embarrassing.
Oh, that is so. It's $4.95. Like the fact that they're going in there and chopping up your hot dogs. Like, would you like a medium well?
It's only because the first time I went to order it, like the lady at the one in Castleton did cut them up for me.
Oh, she offered?
Asked. She just did it.
That's fine.
She
and
set
so
the
now
precedent.
she set. She set the precedent, and now I have to have them cut up like I'm.
Once you go cut, you can never go back.
Are you taking that back to corporate?
I hope she will.
All right, let's circle back. Let's stay on topic. Nathan is
not.
right. Okay, so.
Oh!
Did she just tell you to fuck yourself, Bittner?
No,
not me.
Maybe me.
The author of that eloquent constructive criticism.
The Dear Leader letter.
Nathan? Oh. Listen, I think...
no comment.
It's okay. We're used to having
there's
women
a
mad at
lot.
us.
I mean, a Unite the Right rally on one for them to pretend they are the right is pretty presumptive, wouldn't you say?
Well, if you listen to the Tom Wood Show with who's this guy that you were talking about earlier, the
Paul Gottfried.
Paul
He's
Gottfried,
endowed chair at Elizabeth.
Former, I think he's no
emeritus
longer there anymore
at all.
He's just Mises, I think.
Okay. Oh, is he a fellow there too?
I believe so.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then he has.
I'm shocked.
Shocked.
No, I mean he wrote the what was it? Multiculturalism, the Politics of Fear or Shame, or something like that. That was really pretty great book.
Right.
He's not a stupid guy by any means. He's a Guggenheim scholar. He received Guggenheim Endowment for his contributions to, I want to say, political theory, or for political commentary, journalist commentary. You know, he's a guy that if it weren't for him, you would have no idea where this sort of movement formulated and how they rallied behind each other and what they cloaked their racism in primarily. And so the fact that Kessler is basically a community organizer for the most fringe elements of the American right. And he does a really good job of exploiting desperate and Dylan Roof type characters, really.
Virgins. That's
who he speaks to. He does. That is who he identifies, organizes, brings, gives them a community, and then a digital community especially, and that's where they become radicalized, on these sites.
Just watch that Vice video and think to yourself, I wonder when the last time that guy had sex.
Right. It's someone who's so socially isolated and so secluded from any type of normal thought or just non-political thought in their life that, it's an obsession for them and something that they find gives them purpose. Like if you look at James Fields, who is the one who, you can't dodge the Dodge. He's that guy. Drove that Challenger. He is the individual whose history teacher talked about how he had an obsession with, post-Weimar Republic Germany, Adolf Hitler, and then the formations of the early formations of the Third Reich. And this is in high school. That isn't normal. Like we try to, I don't know if you were like me, but it was like, all right, I'll do what's necessary to get an A in class, but by no means do I care that much about any of our subject matters.
Right.
In high school, don't look offended.
She's always offended.
I'm a literature minor, so.
Oh, I mean, just in social studies. Sorry. So, okay. I loved The Jungle, like by Upton Sinclair, and there were certain. The Ugly American was great. I didn't know that it would be foreshadowing of Trump, but it really was in every way that. But in social studies, you learn the world history and the civics class, the government. You have to. No one goes on a deep dive on the SS and their organizational structure and what.
I know a friend who did
I
that.
do.
Yeah.
I mean in high school.
In high school.
That's what I call vacation.
In high school.
In high school.
Yeah.
No.
Did you really?
No.
No, I have a friend who did.
Right. What's he do now?
He is recently got his JD.
Okay. So he normied.
Ish.
Yeah. He'll be really good at his subject within the law.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But that isn't normal behavior. I mean, even
no, it's not.
Right. For a guy in Ohio, a Midwestern kid from a relatively you would think on the surface is a normal family, to get so obsessed with Adolf Hitler and the return to Aryan principles and the rightful leadership of the Aryan race of society, that's just crazy. And so that's who this guy Kessler speaks to and identifies and feeds them exactly what they're looking for until they get to the point they drive to Charlottesville, Virginia, to go protest with a bunch of people carrying swastikas, getting maced in the face by Antifa people, trying to protest the removal of Robert E. Lee, whose only legacy is surrender in America. Honestly, what other legacy is there than he's a quitter?
Unless you are a true scholar of history, right? I mean, because there's a lot more to the Lee story, but
fleeing his home that is now the Arlington Cemetery.
But in the grand
of course.
In the scheme of today's,
winners write history.
All he is he was the guy who lost,
on
the wrong side.
And to paraphrase Trump, I only like people that win wars.
Right.
And so that's the thing is that isn't, you shouldn't go unite around it. Slavery isn't a lasting vestige of white culture. It's not like that was quintessential to the white experience in the course of history. Was slavery.
They're rallying around the loss of white culture, and when
the fear of not being the political dominant.
When we walked through this with one of our alt-right friends, it basically was all about culture, saving Western civilization and our culture.
The Crusades,
that's a great dog whistle phrase, but that because you and I will sit here and we talk about on this podcast, do you want to save Western culture? Well, hell yeah, absolutely. I love Plato and Kant and the Enlightenment. I'm a big fan of Kant.
The proliferation of individualism and like natural rights, and the idea that you aren't just the byproduct of the community.
Liberalism.
Who's against that?
Classical liberalism. Yeah, exactly.
It's sort of the
I hate liberalism though, so I'm offended.
That's what that is.
I know,
but it's sort of the same thing.
Triggered.
I had to do it though.
It's like that button. Hate liberals. Consider yourself a classical liberal.
It's sort of the same thing as like, well, aren't you against racism?
Right.
You know, because who's for racism?
No. I gave that up a long time ago.
Right.
Like
last week.
Yeah, and that's where these guys are. I mean, that's where these guys are.
Right after he took his foot off the gas of that Dodge.
Not true. I put it in reverse next, and then I was done. But I mean, you look at their thinking, and it comes from people who weren't looking for why society flourished. They were looking for a justification for their pre-existing prejudices. And that's my opinion. That's all it is. And this gave them the out. Mm-hmm. This gave them the very out they were looking for. And now you've organized them, and they feel empowered.
And it's not done.
Right. And the more threatened white people become, the less dominant they become as a composition in society, the more you're going to see things like, well, we need to pass a law about English being spoken as the only language, or making it the official language. Right. Yep. We're going to see a lot of white cultural preservation laws become very popular. The tearing down of the statue. If you look at the poll by town hall cited in Charlottesville residents right after all of this on Monday, the majority supported it staying. Even after all of the stuff that happened, they still supported it, which isn't shocking because if you look at the history of slavery in the United States, indentured servitude in the late 1600s was the preference. Right. Because life expectancies were so low, there was no such thing as earning your freedom. They died well before they were ever going to be given their freedom. Then, as life expectancy increases, Virginia starts passing, they see that buying slaves is the better way for exploitive labor because in England, they had cheap labor. They had, sort of actually like the Upton Sinclair huge disconnect of poverty, that people would work for pennies. In the United States, there was a lack of labor. So then they just started buying people. That became the business model.
Yep.
So then they passed laws that support it, which is preservation of a better way of life, a more calm and southern way of life.
Economic protectionism.
Exactly. It's just mercantilism on a smaller scale.
Absolutely.
And so to consider that part of white tradition is ridiculous. It was an economically pragmatic decision that made slavery predominantly popular in the United States.
Right. All right, so let's get into it. This spilled over into the libertarian movement. I
wondered why we all had to take the Hebrew pledge.
Well, I just want to know who you're for and who you're against. I think as white males, we must wake up every day and begin our day with an apology. We're throwing out the Pledge of Allegiance. That's offensive. That's nationalistic. We don't like that. We're now swearing allegiance to I love.
I'm a tyrannical oppressor is what I say to the mirror each morning 30 times.
Right. No, I tweeted out something that it surprised me like how much traction it got, but it just seemed to have. I didn't tweet it out. I think I might have, but I posted it on Facebook, and I wrote, "Hey, it's me. Just wanted to make sure you all know that I'm against racism and against anti-Semitism. I am totally not cool with Nazis or the KKK. I know that used to
so
be
brave.
That used to be just a given, but it looks like everyone is now required to check in with friends on social media and state the obvious. Please be sure to tell your friends you aren't racist today, or else." And it kind of was inspired by a kerfuffle, if you will, that is happening in the libertarian movement. And I will say we're going to talk about Nick Sarwark, the chair of the National LP, a friend of the program, a friend of me, and a good friend of Brett Bittner. We're going to talk about he got into a fight online with Tom Woods, who is by any measure the largest libertarian podcast and media outlet, and in my mind, not a good person to pick a fight with because he didn't really have any ability to fight back, and it's been probably, I know it's been uncomfortable for Nick. We talked today. He's going to come on the program. We sent a message to Tom Woods. He was on in 2013, but obviously he's much bigger. We were episode 16 of the Tom Woods Show, when that interview that we did with him, but things have changed for Tom since then. Thanks us too, but not quite as much. So I actually am running an ad on Facebook for Facebook likes, and it says like the page of the the #1 libertarian podcast, in parentheses, after Tom Woods.
That's right.
And it's done pretty well. So
it's like that Avis We Try Harder ad. That was so famous.
Right. So what you have to understand about the Mises Institute, it was Ludwig von Mises was part of the Austrian school and probably one of its brightest stars. And then one of his students, Murray Rothbard, went on to carry on the tradition. They all came out of the Austrian School of Economics, started by Karl Menger. And it is probably the most popular, most connected to economic philosophy, to the libertarian philosophy, because of Murray Rothbard's work.
The logical assumption, being that everything starts with man's activity,
right,
on a micro level rather than a 10,000-foot approach.
Yeah, I think it's called The Betrayal of the Right by Murray Rothbard is kind of his journey through all these different. He was on the original National Review team. He was
friends with Frank Meyer, and sort of that blend of the National Review until it kind of
then decided to join the radical left for a time, and then that didn't work, and then he joined the Libertarian Party, and that didn't work. And the thing about Murray Rothbard is he was kind of a dick. And
he was a libertarian.
He was a libertarian.
Probably an INTJ.
Absolutely.
Yes, 100% an INTJ, let's be honest.
If you've ever met David Friedman, just think about, a more bald, smarter version.
Can you imagine how much poon Murray Rothbard slayed?
Honestly? Oh,
God. And so Rothbard literally wrote books like The Anatomy of the State and the Libertarian Manifesto and all these great books that a lot of libertarians since Ron Paul, because Ron Paul was a new awakening for the libertarian movement and is very closely associated to the Mises Institute.
He's a Rothbardian.
He's a Rothbardian. It has given that institute a new life. And there has been a lot of tension over the last 10 years, but really forever, because Rothbard hated the Cato Institute. He was part of the Cato Institute, and then the Craniacs, as he called them, kicked them out, Ed Crane, and the Koch brothers.
He's got a long track record of being welcomed, huh?
Yeah, he's been unwelcomed everywhere he's gone, but his writings and his reputation have been well guarded by the Mises Institute, and most popularly by Tom Woods. And I promised and vowed never to read a Rothbard book just because it's popular, and I have taken that pledge back, and I have started The Betrayal of the Right. I did over the summer, and I really started to enjoy it. It was actually put together by Tom Woods, and I listen to the Tom Woods Show every day. I didn't listen to the Tom Woods Show for the longest time because he's associated with the Mises Institute, and he's associated with Murray Rothbard, and in general, I have found that I don't like most people who are associated with the Mises Institute. I find them to be very much like Lew Rockwell. I think is a dick. I think he's just a very negative person, and I don't like his podcast. I don't think that he is a net positive for libertarianism in the way that he presents on the media. Maybe in his behind-the-scenes work, I don't know, but in terms of his podcast, I never would refer anybody to go to LewRockwell.com as their first website.
Honestly, I feel like at this point he's just a historian for what happened back then.
Right.
And that's the maximum amount of use he had for what it was like in the early days of libertarian and where it is today.
Right.
I mean that's sort of the way I feel.
And so because they are all so closely associated with Ron Paul, and Ron Paul was a Republican, many of them just didn't want anything to do with the Libertarian Party because they had been there, done that, and people like Walter Block, like Murray Roth, like Lew Rockwell, like Ron Paul, just kind of were they're irrelevant. We're not even going to worry about them. And I think that's kind of why you don't ever hear, if you listen to the Tom Woods Show, they don't talk about the LP that much, unless it's kind of negative.
Unless it's negative.
And
he says because he's talking to his market.
Absolutely. And so there's been a tense ceasefire between the Ron Paul Misesians and the Libertarian Party people, of which you and I, Brett, and Matt, I would say, are definitely part of that crowd. And then the more right-leaning libertarians of the
Creightons of the world.
The Creightons of the world.
It's really
absolutely.
y'all versus SFL on a different level.
Type
kind
of thing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is legitimately, they're both descendants of the same fight.
Right.
Yeah.
Both those organizations
and
are.
so, yeah, exactly. It's the Ed Crane Koch brothers versus the Mises Rockwell And
League of the South, if you will.
Have I left anything out? Because you are more familiar with any of this stuff.
You did fantastic.
Yeah, the only thing you didn't talk about was the convention of '83 and the walkout when Berglund got the nomination. That's about it.
Yeah. And that was by which swing?
Rothbard.
Rothbard.
No. The Cato and Kochs, they walked out.
They walked out.
What was their main contention?
That Berglund was too radical.
Too extreme.
Yep.
Well, it started with the Clark campaign in '80.
Right.
Which of not being radical enough.
Was it Charles who was the VP candidate?
David was the VP candidate.
And until last year, they were the most successful LP campaign.
Correct.
In terms of vote totals.
Right.
So per capita.
But they also spent way more money than any other libertarian candidate.
Because Koch had no campaign limits because he was the candidate. Right.
Which is why he was the VP when you had Clark, who had done so well in '78, I think, running for governor of California.
Yeah, like 8% or something like that.
Yeah, it was unreal. We'd never seen a candidate like that. So it was natural that he, in '80, after you had the Hospers in '72, which was a sacrificial lamb for
welcome to the to the show.
Yeah. Exactly, they were on the ballot in like 8 states.
Yeah,
but they did get an electoral vote from David McBride
in Virginia.
Who was the 76 nominee? No, not Charlottesville.
Who then became the 76 nominee?
Who then became the 76 nominee as the faithless elector. And I thought it was actually Minnesota, not Virginia.
Oh, really?
I thought it was Virginia as well, but either way.
It was somebody who was protesting Nixon.
He was anti-Nixon.
He was very anti-Nixon. He became the 76 nominee. So this is the first real serious political effort by the LP was in '80 with Clark and Koch, because you saw that they had money, they had a message that they were trying to send. They were
sympathetic electorate too. That
that was the year of John Anderson.
They were rejecting liberal.
They were rejecting Keynesianism. They were rejecting all of it because you had Anderson, who was in the debates in '80.
Yep.
You had Clark, who did so well comparatively. To
Reagan taking the supposed mantle of Goldwater, right?
And then in '80 you had Carter running for re-election, which, let's face it, was never going to happen. So you had an opportunity for people to look in the same way they did in 2016 for other avenues for their vote.
Literally anything else.
Literally anything else. And you saw that with Anderson.
Anderson got 9%, I believe, of the
as
popular
an independent,
vote.
Which is, again...
Did he run on as a libertarian or an independent?
He was true independent.
True independent.
See, that works.
He was in the Republican primaries. And
a lot of the sore loser laws that we saw come about were because of the '80 campaign when he ran as a Republican and then ran again as an independent once he was no longer.
He had some very early traction to potentially get the nomination over Reagan, but ultimately Reagan pulled through, and then Anderson I think bolted in like April. I mean it was pretty late, right? Yeah. Because back then the cycle was nowhere near as long. And then
or nearly in the public arena as nearly as much, I'm sure.
Well, and then so he was invited to the debates, and Carter refused to show up for was it the first debate, I believe, or the second? Yeah,
it was the first one, and then he
lost so much ground.
Populism he lost of the populist vote that he lost to Anderson by not being there as the sitting president.
But anyway, back to So
then that Clark feeds into '83.
But Rothbard was pissed in '80. Okay, so Rothbard was pissed in '80 because he was seeking for what we hear still today in the Libertarian Party. Right, he wanted a purist, radical, unapologetically quote unquote libertarian. Really, what that means in Rothbard's terms is anarcho-capitalist campaign. And Clark and
privatize the courts,
everything, right?
Yeah.
And so Clark and Koch were like, no, they ran on
let's
reduce taxes by 30%, right? Not eliminate them entirely,
rather than cause a Great Depression with radical austerity.
But that's not like, and the LP is still not past that, where it's the purity versus. Let's run a Gary Johnson,
a Bill Weld,
yes. Versus somebody who is in the libertarian camp in terms of the political spectrum, or run
the most libertarian person you can run,
the most quote unquote. And the problem with
Daryl Perry.
That's exactly right.
Yes,
it's the 2016 comparison would be it's choosing Gary Johnson or Daryl Perry. Except in '83 it was in '80 it was Clark and I don't even remember.
I don't know who came up against. I mean, what I understood is there was a little bit of he's much later. somewhat of a tacit agreement, like because Rothbard was part of the Cato Institute. He was right there with the Kochs at the time, and
it came from the Dallas Accord, which is It came from the Dallas Accord, which is where libertarians, the anarchist wing of the Libertarian Party and the more pragmatics, or the minarchists, kind of came together and they said, look, basically we want to right the ship before we fight about where we end up. So let's focus on that. And the Dallas Accord then...
Is that 74 or 77?
I want to say it's 74. Karen and Harless would probably kill me for not knowing exactly when it happened, because that's... a fetish
but it was very early in the history of the
It was super early in the party.
And I mean, this is back when the platform for the LP had like what we would do when we colonized the moon.
Correct.
I mean, the platform was just
Interstellar.
Interstellar. I mean, it was just anybody because it was free, and it's just the LP is very much made up by the people who show up.
Yes.
And so when
any political party or ragtag movement is, it's
you're
a wild crazies that you can get to stay in line for a little bit to give the the appearance of presentability.
Right.
If you show up and work hard in the LP, you can run it in 5 years. If you show
sometimes you don't even have to put in 5 years.
Right, exactly. Like it is literally who shows up. And so when I see these people who write, "For this is why the Libertarian Party," blah blah blah, I go, just shut the fuck up and go get involved, because you're full of shit. You're lazy. You don't want to get involved. You were looking for an out in the first place.
You're a keyboard warrior.
Exactly.
First of all,
you were looking.
You were looking for a reason to not be
in the land of keyboard warriors. You are king.
Right? No, you're not. You're a pathetic
second
loser.
Only to the Libertarian Party itself.
Second only to the cast.
You make us look like canvassers.
Right. So yeah. The
big schism. Yeah.
There's been a tense ceasefire for a long time, and the Ron Paul campaigns really put a lot of tension, especially with new libertarians as they came in, and people like Creighton, as you heard early on in the early days of this podcast in 2012, and you heard a lot in those 2012 episodes. There's an episode I think we called "Why Gary Johnson Should Run." Maybe that was about Rand Paul versus Gary Johnson, but if you go back and listen in the 2012 episodes about Ron Paul versus Gary Johnson, you'll hear some of these arguments that we have, and you hear a Creighton versus Galt and Spangle, who are LP people, versus a Messessian in Creighton. You hear that tension. You hear that argument that goes on. And
it'll never go away.
It will never. Well, it'll never go away. But I think there's a large majority of people who are right-leaning libertarians, and in that I would classify Greg and I certainly.
Absolutely.
I'm a constitutional conservative. Like, I want to conserve the Constitution of the United States. I believe,
as originally written, except for that 3/5 part.
Exactly right, because the Constitution, as it is written on paper, is very libertarian.
Yeah,
but I'm not an anarcho-capitalist. I'm not going to go down.
I'm not opposed to it in time if we can get this to catch on and grow and be adopted. But for right now, if I go out and run a campaign on private courts and radical libertarian ideals,
you're going to be laughed out of the room.
I
will be detrimental to the entire movement because I'll be James Weeks just philosophically.
When I was just on a podcast last week, and I wish I could remember Seth Hurd's podcast, but he was basically like, he had me on because he knew I was a libertarian. He heard me on the Bad Christian Network on Break It Down. And he was like, I want somebody to explain libertarianism to me because it sounds interesting, but my libertarian friend just keeps talking to me about private police, and that just seems crazy to me. And so we had a conversation a lot about foreign policy because he's like, I think that World War II was good, and I don't want private police. And so a lot of my problem with
I love it. That's well done.
Institute is that they start with like the most hardcore shit, and it just scares
people.
You
mean the brutal things?
Well, they are unapologetic anarcho-capitalists,
right? And when you go back and you take a look at the history of the libertarian brutalism piece that you read by Tucker, or parts of it that you read by Tucker earlier, that was shortly after he departed
left the Mises Institute,
right?
And he became
free,
right? He became free of them.
Right. He's doing Fee and Larry Reed now. Right?
He is now.
He's with Fee. He's the chief technology officer. He does Liberty.me. He does Laissez-Faire Books. I mean,
is Liberty.me still functioning?
As far as I know,
absolutely.
yeah. I know that I get updates about them on SoundCloud every once in a while.
The Liberty, like Jeffrey Tucker, we've had on a couple times. If you go back in our feed and listen to Jeffrey Tucker, I love Jeffrey Tucker. I think he's
awesome.
I think he's somebody that really, like, when I hear him talk about libertarianism, I want everybody to talk about libertarianism
in the way that he does,
the way
because
that Tucker does.
He talks about it in a very humanitarian way. He talks about the beauty of what happens when people come together voluntarily to accomplish the goals that they want to, rather than turning to the state to use force to do it.
Right. He's also the guy that put all the free ebooks on the Mises website.
Yep.
He's now doing that for fee.
Yep. He archived the entire Mises library. He did that for laissez-faire, where he was focused on. I mean, he did. There was a period of time where you could donate to laissez-faire. I think it was $10 a month, and you got a ton of ebooks. And I still have probably 1,000 that I downloaded that I haven't read.
Wow.
Because of the time that I was a donor.
Let's be clear, libertarian, philosophy is not, it's not known for its brevity.
It is not.
You get a tomb, and it's all
a wall
extreme.
of text.
Oh, it's perfect though. I mean, it's logically, consistent all the way through. It's wonderful. It is just a lot to get the full nuance of everything you need to grasp to understand why.
And I think that's important because that's the tradition of Mises himself. That's the tradition of Rothbard, right?
Sure.
He is known for being incredibly brilliant and a perfect intellectual and brings a great reasoned case together as to why we land at anarcho-capitalism, right? And that again helps fuel the split that happened, and then the adoration that people like Tom Woods and those associated to LVMI still have today.
Really, the academic community and the intelligentsia within the movement.
Other than Horowitz, maybe.
Yeah, Horowitz is the rare PhD that's among the left libertarians. And then the guys at Bleeding Heart Libertarianism.
Right.
Correct.
Although
they're growing, it's just they're younger.
What's Matt's name?
Zawaliki?
Yeah.
Zawolinsky for San Diego
there's
State.
There's a few more there too, and then
they're just not as prominent.
The
yet.
Nickerson Center, which is relatively new, also has some left-ish leaning.
They're still flushing out their philosophy.
When you say left libertarianism versus right libertarianism, what do you mean?
Social justice libertarianism.
I don't see it that way. Because,
partially yes, partially no.
I mean, the way that I look at it is it's what you focus on and how you talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And
the social justice part is just the more appeal for those individuals.
Well, and because for me, when I'm talking about libertarianism, it's I have a very difficult time selling the things that I think everybody should automatically know.
Yeah, that's because you've ascended the cave and know it all, and you see how they're connected.
But I mean,
no, seriously, like that you see it from you see where they are and why they're there.
Right. And so I get the economics of it, and I think everybody else should, because it was apparent to me. I didn't have to have anybody explain it to me. I didn't have to go to LVMI's stuff. I didn't have to go to the fee seminars. I already got that. Like, it wasn't something that I needed to focus on. And I have found that when it comes to actually talking to people about the issues that are important to them, they don't care about the economics of things. They care about the situations that affect them.
The economics becomes a means to the end to get to wherever it is, and if that means government intervention or state-sponsored this, that, or the other, then they're fine.
And so I feel that I can do a better job explaining the ideas of liberty by talking about the issues that for many are viewed as leftist issues or left libertarian issues, but for me they're just civil libertarian issues.
Yeah, crime and corruption.
It's the crime, corruption. It's elevating a class of people over another. It's elevating collective groups over another. Rather than us focusing on things as individuals and judging what should happen based on how individuals would react.
Yeah.
Which gets back to a lot of the Mises stuff and a lot of the Rothbard stuff. I mean, you take a look at the basis of LVMI is Mises and human action and those kind of things. And it eventually gets back around to it, but there are so many people...
They never get there.
Because they're so focused on trying to cram Austrian economics down your throat, they don't actually have a real conversation with someone. They're just so focused on winning that argument that they're having with you by pushing it down your throat until you relent.
So it is, and in addition to that, right, it's also that segment latched on to what is now referred to as the old right, right? Taft Republicans of the 40s, right? As
how Gottfried described himself
their
originally.
best chance of being relevant, right? And so their tradition and their ethos and everything, to me, seems wrapped up into like my version of the libertarian movement is it is part of the right. It is part of that movement. Okay?
The paleo-libertarians,
so,
really.
Exactly. And so, when I refer to left libertarians in the general sense, and even would describe myself that way in many cases, it's not necessarily coming from the left per se as we think of the left today. It's just I'm not coming from the right.
Yeah,
exactly.
And
right?
honestly, I think a lot of it is what's the best way to deconstruct the state. If you're talking about, honestly, if you think you're going to end the Federal Reserve, you sound like a person at a protest or on a street corner during Gen Con talking about how everybody's going to hell, and
you'll get
crisis
people on
is right
the
around
left
the corner.
to say the same thing too. So
Right, you will.
left.
But if you can reach people, the guy shouting out of a megaphone about how you're going to hell is less effective than the person. I feel your pain.
But
where does it hurt?
But the people that are shouting through the megaphone have a different aim. They're not trying to recruit people.
They want true believers.
Exactly.
Which is the right libertarians.
Exactly.
They're all true believers.
Yes.
Because they've seen the light, they understand it, it makes sense, the model all fits together, and that's why they can't not preach basically old fundamentalist Baptist libertarianism. Like, you have to do it this way. This is why it worked for me.
Yep.
This is the only thing that's been proven to work.
And so much of that comes from how people came to find libertarianism, and so much of the outreach and so much of the recruitment came from the right. And in what you talked with Nick about in the back and forth was you were talking about how you felt it was easier to recruit from the right.
I totally think it is.
But a lot of that is because that is the path that you came to find. Because you came from the right. You came from the right. You didn't necessarily come from the right, and I didn't come from the right or the left. I was just
the immaculate libertarian.
Basically, I mean, I'm like Bane. I was born into it.
We were both weirdos for a long time.
I think that like Greg will back me up on that. I hate economics. Like, I could care less about economics. I care about.
But I don't mean it that way. I mean, you came to libertarianism from the conservatism.
Your point of origin.
But I the reason that I don't agree with Nick, in my opinion, Nick is trying to purge the Libertarian Party of.
Change the composition to be more appealing to social justice libertarians.
Exactly, and trying to push the old guard Misesians out. And in some perspective, I understand that, but they also all weren't really with him in the first place. I just don't see that pursuing. I think we saw it was a catastrophe when Gary Johnson tried to go after the left in 2016. Like, there's nothing about him that appealed to leftists.
A lot did. It's just not enough to pull the lever.
Exactly right.
Which is why leftists
a lot
are
of that happened
collectivists.
on the right, though, too, guys. I mean, he ended up pulling more from the left than he did from the right.
Right. If he had just gone out there and sounded like a Taft Republican, though, he would have got a lot of votes.
Exactly.
And it goes
I
back
don't think
to
he would. I don't.
And
I
run
do
as an
not,
independent.
I do not think so. Yes, as an independent, sure, but the ballot access laws are crazy in that regard. So. I don't. I mean, we can. That's a whole nother episode. To debate the 2016 election and all that. But I think strategically, ultimately, there are a lot of failures. I don't think it was because he was trying to be too far to the left or and not sympathetic enough to the right. Because Trump filled the low hanging fruit vacuum.
He stole libertarian support for Ron Paul in every state.
Well, here's the thing about
as an outsider,
Gary Johnson. In my opinion, he was trying to be too many things to too many people.
Yes, I agree with that.
And
he was like government trying to do too much.
Right. By and large, if you look at large scale demographics, and we're going to just generalize, people who are on the left are more inclined to collectivist arguments than individual arguments. There is a higher burden that we have to prove to those people about an individualistic world. There is much more. It takes more time for us to sell to those people in just salesmen.
Consumers are more demanding.
Shortly,
right.
I think it depends on what you're selling,
and it depends on where you are. I mean, there's so much that.
But I want to reel this in a different direction.
The other thing, and let me finish this point, is that the leftist groups, if the Democrats are a coalition party, they are made up of Hispanic caucuses and black caucuses, and and various different types of collectivist groups that join together and fight for the common democratic cause. And then when they win, they divvy up the spoils. They divvy up the spoils.
And you see that with groups like the HRC coming out and talking about issues that aren't specific to the LGBT community, where they're talking about saving Obamacare. And trust me, I'm on the mailing list for them and for Lambda Legal and some of those groups that seem to have a very niche focus, but now that they've won, with Obergefell being decided by the Supreme Court, they still have to remain relevant. And they realize that the way to do that is to continue with their audience.
And this was my argument with my alt-right friend, is he was arguing that it's easier to argue libertarianism to white people because they understand individualism better than minorities do.
No, white people are culturally more individualistic than any other ethnicity in America.
But let me finish my point, guys. Everybody stop cutting me off. You have in these minority cultures, they have had to band together and collect because of white supremacy in the history of this country, and there is a strong reaction on the left and in liberal groups towards collectivism that is just it's a harder sell from on a one-on-one basis. Like if Matt is talking to a Democrat one-on-one, absolutely. You can get past that. But on a broad messaging spectrum, we have seen in the last 10 years that I have been in the libertarian movement, one successful politician in Ron Paul who went after the right and was able to market those broad themes and pull in a lot of people, even though he was a wildly ineffective communicator, and Gary Johnson, who was as wildly ineffective as a communicator but had a better resume and less of a cranky attitude, and he tried to ride the fence, and he wasn't as effective as Ron Paul was. And so when I say we should spend our time on the right, I personally think that the Libertarian Party or the Libertarian movement as a whole is center-right because it's more towards individual liberty and individualism, and so it's just an easier sell from a broad messaging perspective. And so when Nick Sarwark wants to go after, and essentially Jeff Deist, who is the head of the Mises Institute, he gave a speech. I cut you off. Finish your point.
I mean, what I was going to bring it back to, and it relates to this because it leads up, and you talked about how the movement grew so much around the Ron Paul campaign. The cult, and I know you have opinions around this, so I was going to let you spout. The cult of personality around Ron Paul continues to plague the libertarian movement today. Absolutely. I love Ron Paul as much as the next guy, maybe not quite as much as the next guy, but it continues to perpetuate way beyond its shelf life.
Yep.
And Tom Woods, who we'll get to through this, what next point you were about to bring up, right, is person number one in terms of perpetuation of the Ron cult personality.
Austin Peterson on another level is too in the primary.
Yeah.
The thing about the Mises Institute is they've done a better job of putting out their people in a front role and promoting them than like the Cato Institute or Reason. Everybody knows Nick Gillespie and Matt Welch. Like they've done a great job.
The guy in the leather jacket on Bill Maher,
right?
Yep.
But the Mises Institute has done a great job of promoting those cults of personalities and promoting the Walter Blocks of the world, and so they get more traction because of that. And Jeff Deist is their new president.
Or the head of the
whatever,
institute.
CEO or whatever.
He's the head of it.
Yeah.
And he gave a speech which I'll read here. Because
was that the one in Europe?
The podcast that triggered this and it was a speech in Malta.
Yeah, that was the one.
Yeah. And so he said, and honestly, he says something along the lines of a lot of what we've talked about on this podcast. We might fight for property too, maybe not as fiercely. We certainly would protect our homes, but that's because of the people inside. How about cars? Would you physically tangle with an armed robber who is driving away in your car? Or would you just let him go and not risk death or injury just to save your car? How about your wallet? How about someone stealing 40% of your income, as many governments do? Would you take up arms to prevent this? We probably wouldn't fight for Bitcoin or net neutrality or a capital gains tax, by the way. how about an abstraction like fighting for, quote-unquote, your country or freedom or your religion? This is where things get more tenuous. Many people will fight for such abstractions, but if you ask soldiers, they'll tell you that in the heat of the battle, they're really fighting for their mates, to protect the men in their units, and to fulfill a personal sense of duty. In other words, blood and soil and God and nation still matter to people. Libertarians ignore this at the risk of irrelevance. And he used a phrase in blood and soil that was which I had never heard this phrase. I don't know about you guys.
I had, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a Nazi phrase that was about pure blood and making sure that we have the idea that like the Nazis fought for leg room, Lebensfrau, is ridiculous to me. But it goes back to their creation myth. You can look at this in two ways. You can look at this as somebody who is using an artful phrase to echo back to history to invoke those things, saying this is what they're invoking, and we have to be careful that people are drawn to fascism, and we need to be aware of this. Or you can say, we are using a dog whistle phrase to attract Nazis to the Mises Institute. Nick Sarwark is the chairman of the National Libertarian Party. In my opinion, he's been a very good chairman. But Nick is very snarky, and Nick's snarkiness doesn't really work as chairman of the National Party, in my opinion. And I think that it sometimes gets him into trouble. And Diaz went on Tom Wood's podcast recently to talk about this, and they both
the Nazi accusation,
the accusation that he's a Nazi, and they both claimed that it was absurd. I did not listen to it. I did not hear the actual podcast.
I don't think Deist actually was back on because I tried to listen.
They
to
just
both
played
of
his
those
speech.
today.
Right.
He played the entirety of the speech in early August, like
Gotcha.
August 2nd or 3rd, and then today, or the most recent podcast yesterday, it was with Gottfried.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And there were references to it in that podcast.
Right. I did listen to that. But Nick chose to ascribe the meaning that this is dog whistle politics and that the Ludwig von Mises Institute is the official think tank for the alt-right. And
he criticized, what he said is that he goes and reads Murray Rothbard's right-wing populist essay on Lew Rockwell's page. And what it was the OG strategy for creating a political movement between libertarians and right-wing populists with the Pat Buchanan campaign in 92.
Right.
And Nick considers it a failure. He considers that a political failure because the association is politically toxic and turns away anyone you might be appealing to because of the type of phrases you use, the references to nationalism, traditionalism, white favoritism at minimum,
and it centers the libertarian movement and philosophy directly in that incredibly conservative. We'll use that in a very friendly,
culturally preservationist
sense, right? So it does not. It's not that it's not quote unquote catering to the left, right? It's shutting the fucking door.
Yep.
To the left.
It closes the door to the potential of reaching out to the disenfranchised Bernie of, they get mad and they say that, government, they get mad because they say government's corrupt. They never take the time to realize it's the very institution and what it allows that encourages corruption, not the people in it. If they understood that, there weren't these angels they'd ever find that could go and run a government great, the answer to corruption is not more government.
Right.
It'll just lead to more corruption. And so the appeal of someone when the light finally clicks on, oh crap, it wasn't so much that Hitler did the Holocaust and he was a bad guy. It was that their government's monopoly on force allowed him to do so and allowed someone who's a terrible person to take control of that monopoly. Once the light comes on that government allows the corruption and the genocide, then you have no appeal. You're not appealing to those people because you're going around using the same themes to appeal to the neo-Nazis.
Right.
Yes.
So it's drawing a clear line in the sand for the most part.
Yeah. And, I mean, what's your opinion on this, Brett?
Well, so I think that Matt laid it out. You literally closed the door on recruiting from one side of the political spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And when you completely shut that down, it's going to take decades to open that door back.
Sure.
You're going to have a hard time finding the key. You're going to have an even harder time opening that door. And by the time you finally do, you've lost so much political capital by only being able to talk to maybe 40% of the American electorate, that you're never going to be able to be where you want to be.
Right.
And I think Woods, the Von Mises Institute, Ron Paul, all have been willing to take that risk, not necessarily like, oh, let's associate ourselves with this horrible ideology of racism. However,
Mises,
whatever might have been there, newsletters, yada yada, let's put that aside for a moment.
Yep.
I think that group is ready to disavow any chance of attracting the left in today's world, in today's political world, and thus the strategy. And you know, Ron Paul's a Republican, Rand Paul's a Republican, right? Has been this is where we place the bets. Damn the torpedoes. We don't care about anything that comes, you know, outside of that. We are going to we are going to brand libertarianism in a sense of conservatism, right? And so I personally don't agree with that. I think we have counterfactuals in my own personal experience that Ron Paul brought people in from the left to just that blows that theory out of the water,
sure.
Right? And so I think that and that's why I've stopped reading Mises, you know, I don't know, 8-9 years ago, right? And it just wasn't. I found nothing that came out of the Mises blog, or
they stay in very clear boundaries on what they research and contribute
so,
to.
You know,
well, in my opinion, they have, as an institute, pigeonholed themselves into fanboy territory, and if they stray too far, then they run the risk of alienating the people that they have so hardcore indoctrinated in some ways. The
Catholic Church doesn't just come right out and say we support gay marriage. You know what I mean?
I don't know if indoctrinated is the right way. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, but I mean it's the same thing. Like, you're not going to have the Catholic Church just come out and say, "Oh, we support gay marriage" out of nowhere. You know, it's a slow boil if you can get them to evolve to that point.
Right.
You're really responding to the context.
What I like about Tom Woods is that Tom Woods is likable, and that Tom Woods is a clear communicator, and that he has the ability to talk on a wide breadth of subjects. He
did so for a very long time when there was no one else out there,
and is now 1,000 episodes in, and people can go download and get a full education on the current events in a very deep way from a certain perspective. But he's also been willing to go and interview people like Chris Cantwell and people that he's
fearless,
that he doesn't agree with. But it is interesting that he did pull the episode with Chris Cantwell. It is no longer online.
So hold on, I mean, I do think, I mean, I haven't looked through his entire 1,000 history episode history, but I mean, how often has he reached out to, say, members of the left, right? Especially maybe the radical left, to attempt to find sympathies and attempt to find common ground. I doubt you would find that.
Well, there's the Tucker Carlson way, in which you're describing, which is go out and beat up liberal professors. And there's people who will talk to people. Like, let's be honest.
I mean, talking to people.
Here's the Cantwell thing with Tom Woods. Tom Woods talked to Chris Cantwell 3 or 4 years ago. Like, Chris Cantwell was a divisive person, but this was even pre-brutalism. Chris Cantwell was a well-known figure in the libertarian movement at the time, and to say that somehow he is interviewing Chris Cantwell as a dog whistle that he believes in white supremacy based on what Chris Cantwell says now, time traveling back into time, like, and guilt by association just doesn't work here for me. Like, I just don't find that to be it is. Chris Cantwell is a despicable human being, and I wouldn't have interviewed him. We could have interviewed him. We didn't interview him, but we also aren't doing the same type of show that Tom's doing, where Tom is trying to reach out to people who have a position of status in the libertarian movement and talk to them.
I have no issues with that particular case, right, and years ago, whatever, but there are some troubling aspects, right? And I know Brett will like to go further on this, but I'll his revisionist history, especially around the Civil War, is disturbing.
Quite.
And he's not the only one, and so I don't know how much of it is him, how much of it is, this is just kind of the whole Mises / Southern connection, although Woods is a Northerner himself.
Contrarians are going to contrarian.
But you also, from within Mises, you have Tom DiLorenzo, who spends an inordinate amount of time tearing down Lincoln.
Yeah.
Not saying that Lincoln was great, but he does. When you look at the general American populace, they would not appreciate.
There's a lot of pushing of that the Civil War wasn't about slavery.
Right. There's a lot of pushing.
Yeah, which is just wrong.
And it's just wrong.
And it happened on our Facebook
wrong.
page the other day. Like, the Civil War, it's like saying that, okay, well, there were probably 10 reasons that the Civil War happened. And in this pie, 80%, 90% of it was the fact that for 400 years we'd had people in chains and were systematically murdering, raping, killing human beings and using them as property. Well, they invaded our border. Okay. All right. I mean, it's you can't say that those 9 in the 10% of the 90% is the dominant reason. That's just intellectually dishonest. But I do think that there is value to see the alternative history. There is value to understand that there were actions by Lincoln taken that shredded the Constitution. He was a tyrannical president, and he did it to save the Union. When in reality, what was the point of saving the Union? If the saving the Union was about keeping the Union together, then that to me is not a just war. If the Civil War is about saving black people from slavery, I'm for that. You know, in our own country, going to war to end that ill. I mean, the Civil War is a pestilence that was the consequence of sin, in my opinion. I mean, it was. But Lincoln didn't go to war to save black people. Lincoln went to war to save the Union. And
a much less noble,
much more cowardly cause, and he did it in a way that usurped so many of the congressional powers to save the country. So Lincoln is a complex figure, and he is revered and a hero in our government schooling. Brett wouldn't know anything about this because he was homeschooled, but he was homeschooled
his own bus
at his own pace.
Own pace, yeah.
But the complexity of a Washington, a Jefferson, a Lincoln, these are things that should be discussed. And I don't fault somebody like a DiLorenzo or a Tom Woods for putting that forth. It doesn't make them a racist to say certain things or to introduce certain ideas. Like, I know that Greg is not a racist, but Greg makes some memes that are pretty fucking racist, honestly, bro.
Which ones?
Like the one where you and I were driving a Challenger into a crowd of black people today?
Yeah.
No, it was white people's Gen Con.
Yeah, it was Gen Con.
Oh, okay. Well,
there's a whole bunch of nerds.
I'm for white genocide, honestly.
Yeah, it was Danny Lundy.
Yes. Oh, then I'm definitely for it.
See, if you don't know, Gen Con had for years not been paying, or they had been giving free tickets to people that were volunteers, right? And so that's how they compensated them rather than paying them an hourly wage. Turns out, to respect a law that's on the books and they're founded in Washington State, they are not allowed to this year accept those volunteers because it's free, free labor, and they don't count that as compensation for your access and all the stuff, the swag they get. And so, I can't support an organization that exploits free labor.
Right.
I don't think it's right. I think they should be paid a fair and living wage, and I'll never get on board with exploitative. It's a lot like slavery. Yep. I can never support Gen Con slavery.
It's the same thing as like entertaining the idea. Like on this show, Greg is not as hardcore of a Trump supporter as he makes himself out to be.
No, I like Trump the character, not Trump the policy wonk.
Same here. But if you say, yeah, he's done some good things, which he has, then you're pinned into one of these two groups. And so we've lost the ability to have free-flowing, nuanced discussions.
Right. You can't be both. You have to be one or the other.
Well, and we're seeing that in the debate that's coming out among non-libertarians about Charlottesville. Well, I won't say all libertarians hold what I'm going to... Anyway, in the non-libertarian world, you are either pro-alt-right or you're pro-Antifa.
Right.
It's the only thing you can be. You can be one or the other. And as Matt pointed out, there is no nuance.
Right.
It's libertarians that are saying, hey, look, it was the introduction of violence into a political situation that's really the problem. And it doesn't matter who's doing it, who's perpetuating it, who's starting it, the whatabouts. It all comes down to the fact that there were a bunch of people, regardless of which side of the situation they were on, that used violence for political ends.
Right.
and social ends. And so in doing so, they were wrong. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about the alt-right. It doesn't matter if you're talking about Antifa. All that matters is that you point to the fact that violence was what was wrong. And that's what many libertarians are pointing to, is the fact that, again, it's not I'm pro-alt-right or that I'm pro-Antifa. It's that I am anti-violence. But that gets lost in the way that we have, and we see this in elections, where you have, there's only the Republican, there's only the Democrat. Well, there's only the alt-right, and there's only Antifa. There were other people that were there, too.
It's the tyranny of the binary, as we've called it.
I think that's a great term for it.
The tyranny of the binary.
What I think is missing from this entire debate is the actual history of it. Rothbard wasn't dumb. He's an incredibly smart guy, and his decision to affiliate with the current... the origins...
expedient.
He had tried the left. That's what people forget, is Rothbard would have died to affiliate with the left. He catered his message to the left. He worked with the new left, the left radicals, in a very free love, hippie Woodstock era, who he was sure he could, curate the right content and get them to walk down, come on board. Didn't happen.
Yeah.
Once he saw that avenue's closed, and I maintain the same thing he found, you will never, I don't care about anecdotal or the one-off, the exception doesn't disprove the rule in my opinion. I think at the end of the day, you give Bernie Sanders and hand him up in this last election, you lose about 250,000 libertarian voters who claim to be libertarians. Because they would have fell. Joe Ruiz, one of our former co-hosts, loved Bernie more than any Gary than anyone. Left libertarians will always, always, always be susceptible to going back to the collectives and thinking, well, that's who I used to be, and this one really, he speaks to me in a way that the old, Hillary didn't. And so that is why I believe that the left is the biggest waste of time, because we've already been there, already done that. And so then you say, well, if the left's closed, shit, we might as well get as many of the people on the right or that out there to get.
Right.
It's a strategically smart decision. It was the most effective, I think, political decision the libertarian movement has made. I hate those people. I don't care if I turn out.
I disagree. I hear where you're coming from.
Oh, yeah, and it's a personal thing.
Yeah.
And
I'm not right. There is no right.
I disagree as well.
That? Did you record that?
Well, he and I are very different in that he'll admit that he may be wrong.
Yeah, I'm often wrong. I'm just never in doubt.
Right. I'm never wrong.
That's why he's a leader.
Right.
Yeah. So going to what you were talking about, you take a look at the last 10 years of recruitment within the libertarian movement, and it has been primarily to the right. A lot of that has to do with Ron Paul. And again, it also has to do with 8 years of having President Obama in office, where you can be a part of the opposition and you become friendly with the opposition party. You become friendly with the opposition movement. It's much easier to pull from that side at that point in time. We are now in a different political era where we have milked, I believe, all of that outreach to the right for all that it's worth. And we are now in a position where we can be, again, part of the opposition movement, part of the opposition to the current
it's
leadership.
Context specific on who you recruit to.
So at this point, when you have a Republican in the White House, you have somebody who people, for some reason, identify as a, quote, conservative. It is a lot. It makes more political sense, in my opinion, to focus your efforts in pointing out the negatives of their leadership and their policy and aligning yourself with the people that you can be friendly with on those terms and work on your recruitment in that way, as you've already milked everything on the other side for the last 8 years for all that it was worth.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it goes back to the challenge that, and this kind of talks on to the kind of the series that we talked about earlier, what we were going to maybe do, right? Is that, I mean, libertarianism in of itself is a natural extension of what liberalism was for centuries. And it is an uncomfortable and uneasy home for it to sit within anything that is conservative. It ultimately does not fit there. And it has fit there better, arguably, than it has fit on the left for probably at least 60 years at this point.
Absolutely. Right, because everything switched.
But because there's a lot of, and we can go, it's early 20th century, late 19th century stuff of the complete transformation of what liberalism is, and that's why we now talk about classical liberalism versus, but the bottom line is I just don't think that it can continue to be, that it's a 60-year aberration to a degree, more or less.
When you look at the overall
historical, and so eventually it's going to come back, right? And I think the other mistake,
if you think the American left is going to become
not
champions
necessarily
of the individual,
no, not necessarily that, but that you're going to see that the last 60 years it'll probably last for 100,
longer,
at least 100 years, but. I think that you'll actually see that the terms that used to be will once again actually accurately represent what they are.
So the party of Lincoln will go back to being the party of Lincoln, and the party of Jefferson will go back to being the party of Jefferson?
Possibly. I mean, liberalism
but
has
we're also
in its history, right,
40, 50 years from
individual liberty. I mean, that is where liberalism was birthed, was out of the, basically
the revolutionary
not the divine right of kings,
right.
Power to the people. Right, and power to the people is
populism.
Still a phrase that you hear the left talk about today because it is a natural evolution of what liberalism is, and libertarians
radical
should
change.
Be willing to embrace that. Right, the challenge is that collectivism, right, it has come into play, and I don't want to actually use collectivism because that has different connotations around it. It's the welfare state, right, and the fact that the state needed to step in to do something that. And frankly, the rise of democracy had a lot to do with this as well. And again, we'll save this for future episodes. But the fact that Antifa and other hardcore left ideologies or organizations that espouse those ideologies, like libertarianism, has its birth in those ideologies. Like the word libertarianism, right?
The decentralization of power.
Things like anarcho-syndicalism. Which it's anarchy, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it is a close relative. The difference is that instead of a capitalist system from an economic perspective, it's a syndicalist perspective, right? And frankly, in an anarchist society, can I sit here and tell you that I think necessarily that capitalism would be better than syndicalism? Frankly, I can't make that call. And frankly, now we're just talking about theory and magic unicorns to a degree, right?
Totally. Where's the fairy dust?
But then to reject all of that, hard, more radical philosophy on the left, I think does not serve us good.
Agree. Yeah, they are the home of revolutionary change and quick change, and they're also the home of decentralization of power in the name of populism. And so it's just that they arrived at the logical conclusion that we need to collectivize after we revolt. And so that's the only protection that remains.
But do you collectivize via the state, or do you collectivize via
if you can sell them on private collectivism, right? that's great. I mean, I just
well, that's what anarchy is.
It is, and my opinion is just that once you get into that mindset, there's a natural appeal to power, obviously. And so you're going to create institutions
that
guarantee
why I'm not an anarchist.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, there's challenges amongst all of it. Right?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just I don't think that once you become a collectivist, and it's so rare for people to flush these things out intellectually and philosophically, they never abandon the collective mindset and see no harm of creating a collective institution that prevents the fear of overthrow, since they're the power to the people class.
Yeah, but I don't think...
Which is what the revolutionary generation did.
Individualism, I don't think, personally, can survive on its own. I do not believe that this is why, again, this is where the conservative movement became the potential home, right? In the last 100 years, it's because you go to the family unit, right? It's not forget the state, but we still need community. We still need that connection.
The social bonds.
And so where do those social bonds come from that we can rely on? The church, the family, right? And those institutions, non-state institutions, is where the anarcho-capitalist wing, right, decided to latch itself to as the natural new ally.
They needed an answer.
Right.
And that was the answer they needed.
Because that's where, and this is where there was the schism between Rothbard and Ayn Rand.
Yep.
Is because the objectivist theory of the absolute elevation of the individual, Rothbard's like, no.
No, social Darwinism isn't necessarily a good thing. And Ayn Rand would disagree.
Right.
That problem will handle itself.
So to bring this back to the Sarwark Woods thing and showing, I guess, my bias to begin with.
Your bias is just hanging out of your...
It is.
Out of your microphone.
And that's fine. I understand the motivation for Nick in pointing out the problem with focusing only on the right.
Right.
And then what really drove me crazy about the conversation that then took place was, yes, Nick is very snarky. Maybe it wasn't the best time to be talking about this. Maybe it wasn't the best
Nazi
arrow.
associations are never.
Well, wait, it wasn't the best
Right.
arrow to shoot at Woods at this time.
And maybe Woods was not the right.
Or at
And-
all.
and-
Right.
And right.
Or anyone at Mises.
Lou Rockwell?
Wait,
Okay.
hang
Yeah,
on,
high
hang
five.
on. So, but you get to the actual conversation that took place, and you saw that one of the people in the conversation, while snarky, was very full of class, and you had somebody else in the conversation that went directly to derogatory comments, went directly to insults, went directly to name calling, 2 or 3 tweets into the conversation.
I guess we can't really say anything about that, Greg, can we?
What?
The name calling was...
Oh, I prefer
was the-
direct confrontation than to passive-aggressive indirect comments.
I mean,
I think that's just pussy behavior.
I mean, I kind of thought it was funny when he called him a used car salesman. Like, Nick is a lawyer. And
It's
he's
a fact.
Right.
Well,
but
and
Yeah, but I mean, the second tweet, I think, was like
Low
low
IQ.
IQ in the 50s.
We've
right?
never
Which-
tested
that's-
it.
we have we tested Nick's IQ, Brett?
I've...
We know you have one of
I'm pretty sure it's
186.
not in the 50s.
But definitely not in the 50s.
Now we're assuming low.
No, here's the thing.
Other than the whole
In-
Noda thing,
in the-
Nick has always been a very smart person.
In the conversations that I've had with Nick, there are times where I have felt, and this is very rare for me, that I was not the smartest person in the room.
No, I think Nick's a very bright individual.
So the idea that you would go after him in that way and you would be so derogatory in name calling when you could, as 2 intellectual individuals, actually have a conversation.
It was a Nazi accusation.
Not
That's
once.
intellectual
So,
about it.
Not once did it. Not
Diaz?
once.
Let's
Ultimately, it was a proxy war.
wait.
Right?
Let's
So-
back up.
Yeah.
And not once did Nick use that phrase.
On behalf of poor young Morgan, let's back up and focus on something that Brett just said. On the rare occasion I felt like I wasn't the smartest person in the room. How do you deal with this? You just scream it out. Like, it's... I'm speechless, honestly.
Well, I know that he needs his ego stroked, so I just kind of go with
Amongst
it.
other things, right, bruh? Huh? High five.
How did I know you were going to do that?
Right?
So yeah, I just kind of go with it. But you know, I feel like he needs to feel that way, and I don't want to make him feel dumb when I talk. So
But that's the thing.
That's the burden of being more intelligent.
But there are
it
times.
is. It's tough.
So, INTJ, man.
But to bring up, to actually follow up to what Morgan said, there will be times where she's talking about things where she is the smartest person
Chili.
in the room.
Expert.
Chili, Taylor
No,
Swift.
By association.
No,
Right.
I mean seriously
Blogging.
though, things like
Tumblr.
literature,
Right, literature.
the vast amount of
Typewriters.
content that she's consumed.
Yeah.
and you know, blows me out of the water. I mean, she can read probably 100 books in the time that it takes me to read 2.
Absolutely.
And so there's a vast breadth of knowledge there.
When you have
At
no
his own-
friends.
he goes at his own pace, too.
Right.
Well, that's the thing, is a lot of people-
read at your own pace.
Well, a lot of people mistake, intellectual horsepower for knowing a lot. Like,
Right.
a lot of it's rote memorization, not the, John Nash style, megawattage for math and logic. So,
Everybody is
so
smart
we
at
don't,
something.
I'm just saying, based on what we've just established, we don't know that he was wrong. And I think it's wrong to assume he's wrong because he's a Mises fellow. And he knows math and he knows megawattage.
Well, here's the thing. Tom Woods is hugely influential. He has the biggest libertarian podcast, second only to us. Hold on, I'm getting a phone call from Kat Anagnos. Hold on. Kat?
Hello? Is this Chris Spangle?
Yes, we're on the podcast. What are you doing?
Well, I'm live reporting from the scene of a terrible accident in Muncie, Indiana.
Uh-oh, what happened?
Well, long story short, my roommate tried to cook a turkey bacon, being the vegan, snowflake she is.
Turkey
And
bacon,
she tried to
Brett.
cook a turkey
Blasphemy.
turkey burger, actually. And
It's like
Even worse.
She didn't realize you can't put grease on the stove. And
grease fire.
Oh, boy.
Flames are as tall as the ceiling.
Yeah.
Flames as tall as the ceiling, you said.
Yeah, it was so dramatic, and we put it out with a fire extinguisher that we had stolen months prior.
They had the fire extinguisher that they stole.
We lived.
You lived, okay. Did you call the fire department?
We did, and we told them specifically on the phone that the fire was out. We just wanted them to tell us how to get the smoke out, and next thing we know, 4 full-sized fire trucks are down our street.
Well,
Sirens blazing.
This is your first day back, right?
This is our second day back.
All right. How much weed have you smoked?
We have not smoked any weed, actually, but I feel very funny with all the smoke from the fire. It's not really airing out.
Well,
the smoke from the fire, guys. From the peace pipes.
Yeah, we are glad that you are okay. We thank you for calling with an update. The audience misses you. Greg does not miss you.
I miss them, too.
Tell her I want to put her
Greg doesn't miss me?
Greg, do you miss Kat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the Confederacy.
Like the Confederacy. All right. Is there anything that you want to say to the audience?
Well, I would just like to tell the audience, thank you for supporting me. Thank you for checking in that I'm alive. Barely. I almost died. And I will be back soon, I promise.
Would you like to scat for us?
Oh, would I like to scat? Sure. A 5, 6, 7, 8, big box, diddly tap, skiddly tap.
All right, that's enough of that.
That's cultural appropriation.
Yeah. So, anyways, yes, my problem with the Nick Sarwark thing is that he went after Tom Woods, and like I wasn't aware of the Diaz speech. I didn't know anything about it. All of a sudden, I just see it all blowing up, and I'm like, I like Tom Woods. I listen to Tom Woods every day. What's Nick's problem? You know, and then it just turns into a big thing, and then people go, well, I'm a right libertarian. I like Mises. What is he talking about? They don't know, and I told Nick this. I said, you have what we call in marketing the curse of knowledge. Just because you know 100% about your industry, don't assume that everybody else watching knows 100%. They know 5%. And so they don't know the backstory that we've just presented to everybody. They don't know all the things that we know. They just see you picking on the guy that they listen to every day that they like. They don't know that he's a secret racist that hates Jews and blacks and started the League of the South or whatever. Like they don't even really necessarily care because I listen to Tom Woods every day. I started listening because I was like, you know what? He is popular. I should know my competition, and I ended up liking it. But
he's excellent.
But I had an aversion to him because he's affiliated with the Mises Institute and Lou Rockwell. But
he went to Columbia.
Right. But it's
not like he went to Auburn and graduated from there.
And so Nick picked a fight with somebody he couldn't fight with. It's one thing to punch up a little bit, but don't punch up to somebody if you're going to go after in a drunken tweet, don't pick Tom Woods, pick like Mark Thornton.
Lou Rockwell. Pick Lou Rockwell.
Please.
Pick the person responsible. Don't pick somebody by association.
I would be on your side.
Right. Everyone would. That's the whole point.
He's a dick.
And if you did, instead of doing it the way he did it and just said, when you stand that close, I worry about you getting hit in the face by a Sieg Heil, then it would have been totally different. But by doing it the way he did it, it was just the wrong way, the wrong time, and nothing does a worse job or a better job of turning away people than self-righteous condescension.
And I DM'd him and I said, what were you thinking? And he's like, I'm just trying to grow the Libertarian Party.
Bullshit.
And I was like, by alienating
it's a purge.
People like me? Like, it was a bad idea. We'll get past it. It's fine. It's a momentary kerfuffle, but I do think that we normally don't talk about inter-party skirmishes, but I think that that's really tied in well with this. Now, to present the opposite side, I mean,
was he justified?
Yeah.
I've been on Nick's side of the entire thing from the beginning. Nick was right. Again, it comes back to tactical decision-making. Was it the right time? Was it the right person? Was it the right, But
was it warranted, though? Was that a warranted thing after that speech? I didn't think that speech was that offensive.
Again,
I agreed with 80% of it.
Especially the blood and soil part.
Exactly.
No,
I mean,
It wasn't a bad speech.
Yeah,
it's a shame.
It was about the problems with libertarianism, and the reason I agreed with so much of it is because we've been down this road. Or I mean, it's more worldview one, but like I agree, like you, like in an election, you go to whatever you can find the most popular protest type of votes, the highest number of protest votes. That's the kind of candidate you field. And it depends on the popularity of the person in office. But, man, this just seemed like I have been holding this in, and I cannot wait to get you fuckers out. And this is a starting of a war.
Instead of like saying, call your old buddy Chris and Greg and say, hey, can I have an hour? And we totally would do that, because this is something that requires nuance and conversation.
Can we downplay the League of the South membership and, charter name and
that's the thing. Or even if you take Nick didn't even bring some of those things up. Nick didn't bring up being a founding member of League of the South. It was other people that brought that into the conversation. It was other people that brought the LVMI scholars and what are the LVMI folks, the fellows that were Trump supporters that the
Walter Block Trumpetarians
get lumped into the alt-right. It was other people that brought that up. Nick was simply pointing to the association. And then
the stupidity of him only taking away that political strategy.
And then everything after that became Woods being a name-calling bully.
I probably would, too, if you say that you took away that was the only takeaway from Rothbard's essay on right-wing populism in the context of the Charlottesville Nazi rally. That is one I would go wild batshit crazy to disavow and make it clear I am not a Nazi or sympathetic to anyone that supports their type of things.
And you'll also notice that of the three parties that actually have a national office, there was only one that actually came out against bigotry in a release that was sent out 2 days after Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the West Benedict authored. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. But again, it's one of those things where it's like
I hate cancer. We're the only party in America that's against cancer.
But they're the only ones that actually said it.
Right, but who cares?
We all assume nobody says we want bigotry. We're the only party in America that supports white supremacy. Like no one's going to issue a press release on that.
Again, but you're looking at the mainstream media news cycle,
right?
Yeah, the mainstream media doesn't care what the Libertarian Party said.
That's true. Right. But what the Libertarian Party is coming about in doing in sending out that release is pointing out that unequivocally, if you're looking for a home. We're the ones that aren't bigots. And you know what? If you are a bigot, you're not welcome with us. Like Wes said, resign your membership today.
This is what I think. That the national guy authors it, and this is pretty damn convenient that these two things are intended. We're the only people, and then there's a declaration and a drawing of that distinction that follows on Dr. Woods by the national chairman and the person that's the only paid, national office worker.
No, there's way more than one.
Or, I mean, he's the most prominent of the... he's the executive director?
He's the executive director.
Yeah, so the executive director and the chairman in this environment tag team the Misesians.
Do they, though?
You put out that declaration, and then you call the other one a Nazi. And it's been a long-standing grudge. Maybe this is the time for... the schism.
El Purgo.
And I don't know that at all, but it just felt like, damn, this is... like a vaudeville slapping people around.
Right.
And maybe I could be totally imposing that on there, and I'm not by any means saying that's what happened, but I was just like, man, for a guy that's a pretty solid dude, yes, he gets some toxic associations because he very much repeatedly has on classical traditionalists like Gottfried, who the only reason he's not called a Nazi is because his name's Gottfried. He has the ultimate trump card on that.
He was a Jew.
Yes. Right. I mean, you can't even call him that because then he just throws that up. I mean, so...
And that was thrown up a lot in the discussion.
Oh, yeah.
I think my dentist became a Jew for the jokes.
Tim Watley, yeah.
But I'm just Woods just to me is such... You want to do it at Lou Rockwell? I am behind you 100% because that guy is he's a guy that at this point, like I said, he's just a historian of what happened at the early days. But man, Tom Woods, to me, is not the guy that I would, one, strategically choose, and two... think earned this for any reason other than he is pretty fearless in who he talks to.
The other part of this is that libertarian media, and this is my final point, and then we'll start wrapping up. But the goal of libertarian media and libertarian think tanks are much different than libertarian parties, where we would never sit here and introduce a show by saying, "Are you against the Jews, Greg? We're not bigots." Like, we don't need to make that statement, but a political party feels the need to make that statement.
Right. Very true.
Where we're going to go, what is racism? Let's talk about racism. Let's get into the weeds on what it means to be a bigot and risk the fact that there will be listeners who will turn this off and go, oh, that's just a racist asshole. Like, the goal of a Tom Woods show is to debate ideas and wrestle with ideas and give people food for thought so they can come to their own conclusions, whereas a political party is trying to tell you the conclusions that they want you to come to. Like, it's two completely different goals. And so the idea that you'd go after Republicans and Democrats, like, I just get exhausted by all the infighting and all that kind of stuff. So, what do you mean?
He did go after a Republican.
Yeah, this is the debate. He's not a party member. He's just a libertarian.
People don't.
Little L.
People do not make that distinction.
No, they don't.
They just don't.
Rand Paul, everyone thinks he's a Republican. He's that libertarian guy like his dad.
Right.
You know, libertarian's the brand he carries with him. That's the lead identifier.
Again, it's curse of knowledge. It's like this show, and I've had conversations with the state chairman of the LPIN. He doesn't want this show to be associated with the LPIN, nor do we want the show to be associated with the LPIN. Like, we are two distinct, separate entities. We just happen to be in Indiana, and they happen to be in Indiana too, and we happen to be libertarians. Like, it's two distinct, completely different things, but to the local political class, they don't make a distinction a lot of times between what I say or Greg says and what the
official position of the party,
which is not our fault, which is not the fault of the LPIN. It is the fault of the ridiculous, dumb political commentator who is trying to lump us all together. Like, or the local Republican who's trying to make hay for his.
What about the local dominatrix?
I mean,
former dominatrix.
She loves John Gregg, from what I hear. I don't know.
Might be climbing up with her 50-foot angel on her back to take down the Diana statue and then hump it. Now, Matt, final words.
It's a hell of a climb, 50 feet.
Well,
and she's like 6'9", so I mean, it's not like she doesn't have a head start.
Huge hands, no problem in that area. Matt, your final thoughts for this episode?
Well, thanks for having me back, even with Never Bittner here. But good to see you again.
It's been quite traumatic. Are you okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, we haven't seen the end of this. The Charlottesville was a coming out party to a large degree.
Yeah. Now they made the news cycle.
It's not done.
Richard Spencer's not the kind of guy that quits.
Right. We're going to see more, which is unfortunate. It's garbage, and I do think libertarians forget Libertarian Party movement, whatever, blah blah blah. I mean, libertarians need to not associate with this in any shape or form, in my opinion. And
which I think drove the chairman's decision.
Exactly,
which is fine because it makes strategic
and to that
sense
end, right? I agree with I think largely what most of us are saying. Wrong person at the wrong time. But there's an incredible long history between the Rothbardians and the Libertarian Party, and that ain't going to end anytime soon either, unfortunately. And
there's right orthodoxy and left orthodoxy within the party. The key is keeping them together on election day.
Yep.
That's it.
Which has not
hate each other the rest of the time.
Pretty much ever. So, the key has not been found.
Little Brett Bittner?
Well, for me, I think we're going to continue to see these kinds of things, and we're going to see it going both ways. We're going to see that there are going to be alt-right people who disrupt some of the collectivist activities that take place. We're going to see the violence continue. We're probably going to see the violence escalate because, again, there's a lot of hard feelings between the two, and everybody is being pushed to one side or the other. And as libertarians and honestly, as human beings, we need to be focused on detesting the violence that takes place to pursue and achieve political and social ends.
Very good.
His nap.
My nap. Greg?
I agree just like you. I think this is just the powder keg that bursted before what we're about to experience, and I can't stand it because no matter what you may want to be, where it's nuanced in there, the ability to say, well, the entire left isn't Antifa and the entire right isn't the KKK.
Fake news.
It doesn't matter.
You might have to stop memeing. That's the real threat here.
Oh,
You shut your damn whore mouth.
Never.
You know what we really need
That
to
is
get
a violation of my First Amendment right.
What we really need to get back to and to bring this country together is arguing over whether it's In-N-Out or Five Guys.
That's a right. Thank you, Brett.
That's what we need to get back to.
That's the age-old question.
There's some always Bittner right there.
Listen, my stance on Bittner has softened.
You say that is the key. That's Aristotle versus Plato. Five Guys versus In-N-Out.
I'm just saying, that's the real debate in this country, and I for one, am team In-N-Out.
Oh, yeah, animal style for life.
All the way.
I've only had it once, so Five Guys. That's what I'm going with.
Oh. I wish you didn't hate black people, Chris.
Sign your petition. You cuck.
Yeah, right. I did love that Fee put. Oh God, a guy wrote an article for Fee that said why it doesn't bother to be called a cuck anymore, and the irony that Jeffrey Tucker's organization authored that was pretty hilarious.
Right, when he's called a cuck all the time.
Oh yeah, he invites it the way he dresses in his bow tie. He does.
Brett.
Yeah.
He doesn't wear a bow tie.
I don't wear a bow tie.
You don't sound anything like Tucker.
Seems like a real bow tie kind of guy to me.
Actually, I've been considering adding the bow tie to my...
It's going to happen.
How dry is your pussy right now? So dry, she said.
Toss me some chili.
Honestly, like...
Well, I mean, there's a clear distinction too between being a Southern dandy and being a left libertarian cuck. There is a very, very clear line, and it's seersucker line.
Bittner is prepared to wear the bow tie because he was a ballerina in middle school. So
the only thing that matters, like Abraham Lincoln said, be a good one. Were you a good one?
Were you a good ballerina?
I'm good at everything.
I want you to stand on your toes right here on the table. Toes. Like Kate Winslet in Titanic.
You poor woman. You poor woman. I know. She said this is why I drink so much.
After she drank a bottle of wine.
Yeah. A whole bottle of Moscato.
Bonged it, really.
Really, yeah.
And she was trying to shotgun a summer shandy, too.
She's 21. Like,
we'll go out on the balcony in a little bit and show her how to shotgun a beer.
My God, get down on one knee, get your car key out. Oh, God, how classy.
She went to Funzy. I'm sure she knows how to shotgun.
Well, I was going to say, does it ever intimidate you?
No, she was asking Greg and I earlier how you do that. And so we need some bush light, and then we can show her.
No friends. I forgot. Single dorm girl.
No, she's very nice. Thank you for contributing because I know you didn't want to, and you did a good job and didn't say anything that's going to prevent you from being hired, especially since you're a manager in training for Gold Star. Or franchisor, I guess. I don't know what the terminology is. But I would say this. It does concern me because this is going to sell newspapers. It's going to sell media time. It's going to feed. And people don't have the time to say, well, not everybody on the right loves, or hates black people, and not everybody on the left hates, is a violent fascist that, genderqueer.
Right.
And not only that, it's also going to distract from what's actually happening from a policy perspective. Granted, we're in the middle of the recess for Congress, but this is still keeping the news cycle focused on this rather than what's actually happening.
Keeps the doors open for these media companies, really. And so they're going to emphasize it, and Richard Spencer's he's a provocateur. Stephen Miller's in the White House. Steve Bannon is in the White House. This isn't going away. This is culture wars, and it's going to be the most effective strategy they have to win re-election and in the midterms is to turn this into a 1994 culture war.
Yep. It's
Yeah, but you brought up the midterms. That's not really going to matter that much because you don't really have too many seats in the Senate that are going to be up. It's like Donnie Ferguson was talking that between now and 2020, or between 2018 and 2020, it's like an 11-3 Republican to Democrat.
Yeah, Mitch McConnell's going to be Senate Majority Leader.
Oh, of course.
Like that's just it.
And the Republicans will continue to have the majority in the Senate.
Yeah, it's just like if one of these big major events happens, and the truth is that Cato put out a study about terrorist acts, right?
Right.
And so honestly, since
like
1992,
bringing Morgan to a podcast,
right? Yes. I'm upset.
My feelings. I have no friends. I read.
I need my emotional support book.
I'm going to go home and journal about this podcast.
Dear Diary, today it was a tremendous...
I have a typewriter. I can proofread.
Oh, I bet she does, doesn't she? It's an Underwood?
It's an Underwood. It's an Underwood typewriter. She probably has it hanging on her wall. 1912 underwriter.
Tell me about how it was handcrafted and what the workers were like that made it.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not even a real hipster.
I'm gonna go drink a craft beer and drown my sorrows.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I think that unless a major event happens by the left, because it's jihadists, then right-wing radical terrorists, they are like, 11% or so of attacks since 1992. And then the left is radically less, but if you just measure from 2012 on, the left's rising trend. So it's going to be who creates the most terrorist environment between the right and left ideologies. And then just the last thing I'd say is you have to be very careful about how much you tie the right wing to the alt-right. And the reason I say that is because of Timothy McVeigh.
Right. Yeah.
Because it would be very easily to say, Timothy McVeigh, Libertarian Party member, and then ask the chairman, well, are you guys pro-federal building bombing? Is that part of the platform? That comes right after interstellar moon travel.
Right.
So be very careful about how you toss that around as a libertarian, because we live in glass houses as people, as a movement. So that would be my last thing. And Bittner, good to see you. Glad you're doing healthy.
Yes, sir. Yes, that's
you weren't
right.
even racist. I'm so proud of you.
That's right, Morgan. 2 cats, 2 scoops, 2 co-hosts, 2 genders. Deal with it. No, I will say you owe Kat a debt of gratitude, because she's made me possibly Bittner. After a long time of firm, never Bittner stance.
Well, she is definitely the superior Anagnos.
Oh, 100%.
I'm still never Bittner, just for the record.
I don't blame you. If I had to see him naked too, I would be very, very anti-Bittner.
You're making some assumptions there, Chris.
Yes, well...
Assume away.
You two waiting for marriage?
No.
No, she went to Ball State, please.
Yeah. So...
You ever heard of an offensive line? She has.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I get it.
Oh, you did. From the entire offensive line is what he said.
No. Jocks aren't my type.
Yeah.
I like them kind of weak and,
Oh, wow.
She likes old creepy weirdos.
Yeah. That's why I love you guys.
Libertarian podcaster.
Whisper taxation is theft into my ear.
But no, I'm possibly Bittner now. I like Morgan. She's been, I like her a lot. We had a nice 3-hour conversation one night, and I was...
was this when you were distracting her from the concert that we were attending?
She was bored. It was your 90s music.
This was a different night.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But
we talk so much.
She has no friends. You know how I am about collecting strange, lonely women.
Matt Wittlief has to take off, and I just want to personally thank him for coming on, because I know how difficult it is with his schedule. And happy belated birthday. If you're friends with him on social media, wish him happy belated birthday.
But yeah, Morgan's delightful. She's been a good addition to your life. You seem very happy. The Never Bittner campaign was when pre-diabetes Brett, pre-diagnosis Brett was a little bit hard to handle. And it's just turned into a great hashtag, and many people. I did get a note from one of our listeners on Snapchat. He said, I've never heard Brett on the show. I joined after Never Bittner started. I'm not sure if I like that guy yet or not. So I think you won them over. This was a very good episode, so thank you for contributing.
Yes, very much so. We needed it, because you know a lot about the early origins, and that's hard to find. So thank you very much.
So
usually if you know all that, you don't want to live anymore.
No, but honestly, you're going to need to write that down eventually, so it's not lost to the annals of the party history.
Oh, don't worry. Karen and Harless, I'm sure, has written it down. The historic preservation stuff.
One more night,
it'll be there forever.
One more night like tonight, and he's getting a large sweet tea from Chick-fil-A and ending it all. He's in the alleys eating donuts.
Just Brimley me, bro.
It'll be nothing but Tim Hortons and Chick-fil-A sweet tea.
Oh,
if you can keep it from the. She didn't share.
Honestly. Right now you have the metabolism of a hummingbird, but 26 is fast approaching. Right, Greg?
Oh, wow.
I would never say that about Morgan. I think too highly of her.
Okay. You really let me down as a co-host there.
She's about to, the snowflake's about to become a blizzard. I'm really
cold here.
It is cold. It's 60. It's 66.
I'm dying.
I told you to get a blanket earlier.
I'm not wearing
here's a box of matches.
Well, no doubt. That's the Morgan style. But I told you get a blanket because
I don't want to touch your
I don't masturbate on blankets. And please talk into the microphone. I
didn't want to call you out.
I masturbate into my mug and bun cups.
Actually, it's this one.
Right. Liberty Force by Johnny Rocket Launchpad is very sticky. All right. Thank you so much for joining us here on We Are Libertarians. We appreciate you so much. We thank all of the 103 people that have donated. That was great to get to talk to them today. We're going to do more of that. We're going to have some Patreon and membership subscription thingies rolling out soon. I'm working on that. I am probably going to kill myself, honestly, if I have to sit in front of my WordPress for one more weekend like I have the last few. But we're getting it done. We're growing this thing, and we're doing it with your help. We are bootstrapping this, and so you are the reason that you can hear We Are Libertarians and get such great information from people like Greg and Brett and... Thanks for being here, Morgan. We appreciate having you on the show, and as always, we promise
to do better next time.
Thank you for listening to the We're Libertarians Network. Get our other shows at We'reLibertarians.com.